Hello, good morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Busy day ahead.
The chair of a review into maternity services says the scale of unacceptable care of women and babies is much worse than expected, but victims worry the report lacks bite to create real change.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again.
Ukraine prepares to share a revised peace proposal with the US after European leaders gather in solidarity at Downing Street.
The government unveils the branding for Great British Railways as the Commons prepares to debate renationalising all of Britain's rail network.
Also today, the public spat that's unfolding at Liverpool Football Club between the manager and Mo Salah. We'll have all the details.
And the car parts that ping back and forth over the US-Canada border will tell you why these tiny components reveal the true story behind Donald Trump's trade war.
A very good morning and welcome. The chair of the National Maternity and Neonatal Investigation says that nothing prepared her for the scale of unacceptable care women have received and the tragic consequences for their babies. Baroness Amos has published her initial reflections following meetings with families in 7 of the 12 NHS trusts being reviewed.
Honestly, none of this is a surprise. You know, we've had multiple reports telling us how bad things are, women being ignored, babies dying when they shouldn't be dying. We'll get a set of national recommendations next year, but I think today's report is perhaps the first step towards a set of national recommendations to be handed down next year. But just to put that in context, we've had 750 recommendations to reform maternity care in the last decade, something that Baroness Amos herself describes as staggering.
Well, here are some of the recommendations and points that Baroness Amos had. What I've found so far has been much worse than I anticipated, and the scale of unacceptable care experienced by women and families across the country is extremely concerning.
She says the challenges that staff are facing as they deliver maternity and neonatal services to women and families also concern me. Well, our health correspondent Laura Bundock's been speaking to one woman who knows all too well the impact of these failings. She has this report.
Rebecca's children are now 9 and 4, but she's still haunted by the trauma of their births.
The care was, I could only describe it as callous. There wasn't any kindness there. I was left in my own blood.
Rebecca formed a campaign for families failed by Oxford University hospitals, one of 12 NHS trusts under investigation in a maternity review. But Rebecca finds its initial reflections troubling.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again in independent reviews before.
This latest maternity investigation was announced by the Health Secretary Wes Streeting in June after a series of shocking scandals.
Crucially, the investigation team, in terms of referenced, will be co-produced with the victims of maternity scandals. The investigation will also pull together the recommendations from the other reviews that have taken place.
Its interim findings report a lack of communication and support from clinical teams and organisations, how women weren't listened to or given the right information to make informed choices at critical moments of their care, and how women's knowledge of their own bodies was sometimes disregarded. The investigation's chair, Baroness Amos, said nothing prepared her for the scale of unacceptable care women receive, and found it staggering there have been 748 previous recommendations about NHS maternity services. She's visiting parents and hospitals to find out more. In a statement, Oxford University Hospital's chief nurse said, "We're pleased to report that feedback received from patients using our maternity service over the last year is positive overall. However, we know we have more to do to improve our maternity services. Our present focus is on listening to the experiences of women and families, which is helping us to identify opportunities for improvement. The national maternity investigation won't be finished until spring, but some are already worried it won't go far enough to bring meaningful change to maternity services.
It seems as though it is heading the same way that other reviews have gone in the past, leading to some recommendations, but no teeth.
Laura Bundock, Sky News, Oxford.
Well, this week we are delving into the crisis facing NHS maternity services across the country, a crisis that has been laid bare in that report today.
And look, the thing about this story is that so many women will have their own story. And if you're listening to this, you might have your own story, you might know of something that happened to someone you love. And if you do, and if you want to share it, well, we want to hear it and we want to amplify what you've got to say as well. So let us know, mornings@sky.uk. Here are some of the stories that you've already sent in, voiced by our producers.
I was administered an epidural which was done incorrectly. It only numbed one side of my body by an anaesthetist who had already worked a 14-hour shift. When they called the anaesthetist back, they were informed that he had gone to do another surgery and I had to wait another few hours before he could administer the epidural again. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression very soon after that. It affected the way that I bonded with my first son and took 4 years for me to try for another child.
I had pains. I told them I felt like I was peeing myself. They checked my blood pressure, listened to the heartbeat and sent me home. By Sunday, my pains were worse, but the weeing had stopped. We went back to the hospital where they checked my blood pressure, listened to the heart, and then belittled me by saying, "Darling, it's called labour for a reason. Go home and have a bath."
I have a history of trauma as a minor, and as a result, PTSD. My birth preferences document included crucial information on my sensory and emotional needs going into labour, and the reasonable adjustments I'd need to be most comfortable and to avoid unnecessary distress if I was in a lot of pain. The triage nurse did not pass along my birth preferences document to the midwives, nor was this verbally communicated. While pushing, I was in a lot of pain, and as a result, I was being quite loud in my discomfort. The obstetric doctor sharply told me to push again, but without the screaming this time, which I found triggering and upsetting.
Do you know, yesterday, today, whether it's the report and the statistics and the takeaways in it, or frankly, more importantly, this testimony that the team has been so amazing to gather and people have been so forthcoming to share, it's so shocking and all the more, I guess, depressing when you just look even at this report. We don't get the final report for another year, and it just the delay on action seems so exaggerated.
Honestly, this it makes me really angry, this, because it's shocking, but it's not actually surprising, because we know this. We know this from multiple reports that have come out before, the amazing Donna Ockenden report, for example, 750 recommendations in the last decade for maternity services in the UK. And also we know it just by talking to people. If you talk to women who've given birth recently or who have struggled to give birth recently, everyone, or the majority of people will have a story or know someone who has a story. And I think that's it. And I think it's what is going to be different this time? What is actually going to change? Because we know what needs to change.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to be speaking to Baroness Amos herself later.
We will, definitely worth listening to that. We're going to be talking to our Baroness Amos later on the programme about this.
Now, Ukraine is expected to share its revised peace plan with the US today after coming under pressure from the White House to quickly agree to a settlement. The initial US-backed agreement was widely seen as favourable to Russia.
So yesterday, President Zelensky met with Keir Starmer and other European leaders in Downing Street, and the Prime Minister says that European allies agreed to, in his words, ramp up support for Ukraine. This is our international correspondent, John Sparks, so warning his report contains flash photography.
The festive trimmings were relegated to the sidelines as Europe's senior leadership team made their way to Downing Street. There was only one thing on the agenda here, and that's Ukraine.
Can this peace plan work, Chancellor?
The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, was first to arrive, his demeanour confident enough as Donald Trump tries to impose a peace deal on Ukraine. President Macron came next, mindful that the Americans are running out of patience. These men have been here before, But the pressure on Ukraine is growing. President Zelensky then followed, a man in an increasingly difficult position. He needs all the friends he can get.
There's a hug for President Zelensky from the British Prime Minister. You know, I think this is mainly presentational. It is a big show of public support for the Ukrainian leader. The Ukrainians are getting battered at the front, and the Americans won't pick up arms for them. So what will the Europeans do? Can they keep Ukraine in the fight?
The display of solidarity came with pre-prepared statements. The British Prime Minister pledging unconditional support.
We stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire.
Yet it's not clear what that means in practice. In a telling moment, President Zelensky then acknowledged his country's vulnerabilities.
We can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
The fear that Donald Trump could walk away. But the alternative is also troubling. New US peace proposals may be difficult to stomach.
I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from the US side, but we have to talk about that.
The American leader may not be across the detail, but he knows how to apply pressure. And we saw him do it after his envoys met the Ukrainians for 3 days of talks.
Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it.
Yet these men must grapple with the details of those talks. Does the Donbass go to the Russians? Will Ukraine get a guarantee of future security? For the time being, we got this.
President Zelensky, have you made progress today?
A wry smile and an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the perilous position he's in. John Sparks, Sky News in Westminster.
Next this morning, our trains are getting a rebrand. Today, the all-new Great British Railways is being unveiled, and it's all part of the government's efforts to bring back train operators into public ownership.
So today, the Railways Bill is going to be debated on in the Commons, and look, it follows the government's decision to try and freeze rail fares for the first time in 30 years. Rob is here. So we're getting these, flashy, new, kind of patriotic branding on trains.
Yeah, this is, I guess, what trains will look like across the UK in, the years to come. We're told it will take about 10 years.
10 years?
But, it's an expensive job. It's about 20 grand to repaint a train. And when you've got thousands of trains to repaint, that's a lot of money to spend all at once that you don't necessarily have right now, I guess. But also, if you have new trains that have just been bought, what's the use, throwing 20 grand at a train that you've only just bought that's not in bad nick already, I suppose. In all seriousness, they've got this new logo, which sort of harks back to the old British Rail logo, the kind of old double arrow. The actual trains will be red, white and blue, as you can see there. The government and Department of Transport's emphasising that this was designed in-house. They used the train livery artist from London North Eastern to work on this. There's always the danger, I think, when any kind of public sector rebrand is going on that you end up with stories about sort of a pack of plonkers from a posh PR agency spending tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money to come up with something that isn't very good. They've been trying to avoid that.
A pack of plonkers. I love the phrase, a pack of plonkers.
By doing it internally. In all seriousness, though, what's going on with the trains and what's going to happen in the coming years is a really big deal. You're going to have one app where you can book train journeys across the country. So you don't end up in a situation where, if your train is cancelled on one route, you can't take a different route because it's a different company that's running it. But I think, like any sort of big overhaul, you need to show people that you're actually doing it, right? And there's no more visual way of showing people that you are changing these things than actually repainting all the trains. So, yes, it's quite a surface level thing, but I think it matters in terms of showing people that, this is going to happen. And the polling shows it's pretty popular policy as well.
I'm all for this. The only thing, if we bring the branding up, is still have a yellow nose. Where does that come from?
I don't know. I guess you've got the Transport Secretary on in the next few minutes.
Should we ask her?
I think you've got your opening question.
Otherwise, I'm all for it. Love it. And I think, good, simple design. We all get what they're coming from. I like the arrows, go faster. even if they're going quite slowly?
Well, this is going to be the proof of the pudding, right? It's not so much what they look like, but whether they turn up on
know.
time and how much they cost.
Yeah, it's true.
The
it's very
arguments
true.
about nationalisation are that, you know, the things that contribute to the cost of trains will still be there in terms of leasing the trains back from the rolling stock operators, the cost of wages. Huge parts of the railway is already public owned in terms of the track. That's already National Rail. That's where a lot of the delays come from as well. So, you know, they want them to look nice, yes, but you've got to make sure they run on time and they don't cost nothing.
Yeah, and they've got to look nice inside more than outside, actually, as well.
Yeah,
with
I
all of
think that's
that.
probably
They're
fair.
clean-
Actually, if you're riding on them,
clean
you don't really
and
care what the
tidy.
outside looks
but,
like, do you?
But it's, as you say, they've got to get the message across of what they're doing, which is widely popular, if it delivers good services. Rob, great stuff. Thanks very much. Now, there's been what could be described as an incredible breakthrough in the treatment of leukemia. People with previously untreatable blood cancer are now living disease-free thanks to a world-first gene therapy.
So the first person to undergo this was just 16 years old, Alyssa Tapley. She was the first person to have the experimental treatment after being diagnosed with a very aggressive form of leukemia. Since having it, she's stayed healthy. I mean, Rachel's here to tell us more. This sounds potentially quite exciting.
It really does. I mean, it's early days, but just to put it into context, you mentioned Alyssa there. She was 13 years old when she became the first person to try this pioneering, this experimental treatment. And at the time, she wasn't responding to pre-existing treatments, and her family were actually considering palliative care. That's how bad things were. But now, 3 years on, she's 16, she's seemingly healthy, planning for her future, trying to pick a career. She wants to go on to work in things like cancer research because of the way this has transformed, of course, her life. And this is all thanks to this potential treatment for this really aggressive form of leukemia, previously considered to be really seemingly untreatable. This is T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's a really rare form of blood cancer where basically T-cells in the immune system just grow out of control and they end up crowding out the healthy cells. Now, Alyssa, the first of a very small number of trial participants to receive this treatment. It was developed by scientists at Great Ormond Street Hospital and King's College Hospital, University College London, as well involved. And they basically take healthy immune cells from a donor. They reprogram a tiny amount of DNA, just 3 specific letters, as it's known, 3 tiny edits. And basically, they tell these T cells, they're put into the patients, and basically they tell them to go on and destroy every single one of the patient's pre-existing T cells, whether they're the healthy ones or the cancerous ones. And it seems to have had really significant impact. So 9 children, 2 adults were treated as part of this study at Gosh and King's College Hospital. 82% of the patients said to be in what's described as very deep remission, 64% remaining disease-free. And researchers say the side effects, they include things like a rash, low blood count. They describe that as tolerable when you consider what the alternative is.
You put up with a rash, wouldn't you? Let's be honest,
completely.
yeah.
I mean, absolutely. So, you know, Great Ormond Street Hospital now saying that they're going to fund 10 more patients to try this. Obviously, we're in such early days. I mean, before this could be considered on something like the NHS, it would have to go on for wide-scale trials, much more research needed. But ultimately, this is a really exciting use of a very new type of technology, which could go on to transform goodness knows how many other types of similar cancers or awful diseases.
Rachel, great stuff. Thank you very much.
Well, we've been talking about trains this morning. Our trains are getting a makeover. It's all part of the government's move to renationalise the majority of the network. I'm pleased to say the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, joins us now. So we've got this kind of quite patriotic branding for Great British Railways. I read that it's going to take 10 years to deliver, though. What's going on there?
So we're actually going to start to roll out the new branding at stations and on trains from next year, but we want to do this in a way that's going to provide value for money for the travelling public and for the taxpayer. I think people want me to be focused on getting the basics right, making sure that the trains turn up on time, that they're as likely to come on a Sunday afternoon as they are on a Monday morning. And so I don't think I would be thanked if I was on your show this morning announcing that we were spending hundreds of millions of pounds on repainting 3,000 trains across the network.
Yeah.
But it is an exciting moment because we're debating in Parliament today the Railways Bill, which is the most significant piece of legislation to affect the running of the railways for 30 years. We've announced the fares freeze for next year, but we're also going to be putting the railways back into the service of passengers, not being focused on profit and shareholders. And as we bring those train operating companies back into public ownership, we're determined to build a railway that people can rely on and be proud of. And this new branding is part of that.
Yeah, I think you're fair in saying that, you know, a new paint job is nice. But the thing that everyone cares about is, the reliability of the service, but also the cost as well, right? You know, we just had a look at some train prices this morning. You know, Glasgow to Manchester return £72, Leeds to London at 7 a.m. one way is £160. That's obviously what people really care about. Are rail prices going to come down?
So we've announced the rail freeze for next year on regulated fares. So for season tickets, for peak returns and off-peak returns between big towns and cities in England, prices won't be going up. For 30 years, prices have gone up in a fares increase. These savings will be very significant. If you had put up fares by RPI +1, which is what has happened in the last couple of years, and let's remember under the Conservatives, fares went up by 60%. The savings, which will mean people can keep more of their hard-earned cash. If you're commuting from Milton Keynes to London on a flexible season ticket, you'd be saving over £300 a year, £57 a year saving between Bradford and Leeds because of what we're doing next year.
What about the nationalisation? I mean, will that have an impact on prices, or actually it's more about the freeze, that's the key thing?
So we've already got 7 train operating companies in public ownership. Fares decisions are taken every year. We do still subsidise the running of the trains to the tune of about £2 billion every year, and that is on top of the over £10 billion that we put in as a country into maintaining the infrastructure, the tracks and the signalling. What we want to do is provide better value for money for people and sweep away some of these inefficiencies that have existed in the privatised system. So in bringing the train operating companies in, we save up to £150 million a year that would have gone to the private companies in management fees, and we can also make sure that we've got more integrated management so we can strip out some of that duplication.
Sorry, I don't want to... I know this is really important what you're saying. I've just got so much stuff on transport to get through. You know, so it's one of these real kind of topics that impacts everyone, right? I mean, some would say, right, that privatisation of the railways never worked because there's no competition. Like, if you're having a terrible service, you can't just say, actually, I don't want to go on this train line, I'll switch to this one. I mean, it's kind of the same with water companies, though, right? Do you think there's an argument for nationalising the water companies?
So what we're able to do, because of the way that the railways operate, is that at the end of the contracts that train operating companies have with the Department for Transport, we are bringing them into public ownership without any cost, Sophie, to the taxpayer. And in some of the contracts, there's, in essence, a break clause, so that once a certain period of time has elapsed,
is that what you're saying?
It's not the same for the water companies. And I think that when public finances are stretched, we've got to prioritise. Now, we said in the manifesto that we would renationalise the railways, bring the trains into public ownership. We're not wasting any time.
I want to ask you about something that splits opinion. It splits opinion on this programme, I should probably say, with us as well. Line bikes. Right. Some people think...
I sometimes ride one to work.
Do you? Yeah. I use them as well, right? You know, full disclosure. And it's not just Line, there's lots of different companies. Some people think that they are brilliant, they reduce congestion, they're more eco-friendly, they get people out and about. Others say they're a complete nuisance, they're blocking pavements, it's really bad for disabled people, for, you know, pregnant women or for people with prams. And also that they're dangerous, right? People use them without helmets and all that kind of thing. What's your take on electric bikes?
So my view, if we can get more people cycling, that's a good thing, because I actually think some people have described it as a bit of a miracle pill in terms of public health, because actually, you know, it means that you're doing a little bit of exercise. And I do think in some cities, some of these new e-bikes which can be hired have attracted a new group of people to using them, which I think is good. I do think that we need to make sure that across the country we've got really tight parking enforcement being done. So in some local authorities, they use geofencing, which means that the bikes can only be parked in a very specific area. Now, if I cycled to work, I couldn't park a Line bike outside the Department for Transport, but I can park it down the road in an area that is specifically dedicated for it.
Is that a good thing, then? Do you think the council should impose that you can only park your Line bike in a certain place?
I want to see more councils using that sort of really sophisticated technology so that people who are using the pavements aren't having to try and clear these obstacles when they're strewn around on the streets. Now, I do think that the operators of these hire bike schemes have real responsibilities as well, because, you know, when they're stolen, when, you know, people are using them not as part of the hire scheme, but they sometimes use them recklessly without insurance, I think that can be a problem as well.
There's just one other thing I want to talk to you about, which is the Baroness Amos report into maternity failings. I remember your campaign, actually, about maternity services at Lewisham Hospital, something that you were very involved in, and, you know, another example, I guess, of maternity being kind of at the bottom of the pile. You know, giving birth is like bringing life into the world. It's the kind of best moment of your life, but it could also be the worst moment of your life at the same time as well. Why is it that we're just consistently getting this so wrong and failing so many women and families and babies?
You're totally right to raise it, Sophie, and I think the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been really concerned about this, because if you look at all of the reviews and reports that have been done over the last decade, I think there are over 700 recommendations about how to improve maternity care, and yet we're still in a situation where women often don't feel that they've been listened to with respect to their own care, and where in some cases there have been appalling failings. I think it's right that Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said that he is going to set up a task force which he will personally chair in the new year, so that when the work that Baroness Amos is currently doing actually comes to an end, we're in a position to move fast and act, because I think mums, dads, bereaved families are fed up of reading about recommendations. They want to know that nobody else is going to go through the trauma that they've gone through.
I don't want to sound too glib about it, but do you think if men gave birth, we'd be in a different situation?
I think that we haven't listened to women in the way that we should in terms of their experiences of their own care. And I think, you know, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has talked about how that is a failing on behalf of the NHS, and it's something we do have to urgently correct.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Heidi, speaking to us this morning.
Lots to discuss from that interview later on in the programme. Also coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Dr. Christopher Sabatini. He's the Senior Fellow for Latin America at Chatham House. We're going to be talking about Venezuela and the Nobel Peace Prize. That's next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Hello again. Donald Trump said his return to the White House heralded a new golden age of America, but a global trade war sparked by his controversial tariffs have created a slightly messier reality.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has spent time on the front lines of Trump's trade war, looking into the impact of his economic experiment. Here's a taste of his report.
Over the past year, I have been travelling the world in search of an answer. How on earth do you tell and do justice to a story like the trade war that we're going through right now, the potential breakup of globalisation? This is the border between Canada and America. And while there's a river running between them, you couldn't really get a better example of two completely intertwined economies. Parts for motor cars going across on the bridge behind me from Canada to America and back again, potentially picking up tariffs on the way. Modern passenger vehicles are assembled from thousands of tiny components. Here at Lanex, they make steel parts you'd only ever see if you look beneath the body of a car, as well as these strikers that secure the vehicle doors when you close them. Making door strikers is not a sexy business. You need to bend and extrude thick steel rods and press steel coil into just the right shape before welding it all together. But, and this is the key part, each of these little components is made not just in Canada, but also in America.
I mean, everything is intertwined. We don't just have Canadian suppliers on one program from start to finish. So you would buy your material from the US side. You would process it on the Canadian side.
Consider the journey one of these striker plates takes in its production. The steel comes from Wixon, just northwest of Detroit. It crosses the border to the Lanex plant in Canada. Then it's sent to Brampton, Ontario for heat treating before travelling back across the border to Warren in the suburbs of Detroit for plating. Then the part goes back over the border to Canada again, where it's packaged and sent to Lanex's customer, who then sends it back over the border to assembly plants on the US side. This little component has crossed the border 4 times, but it's one tiny example of how much trade is embedded in the goods we use.
Well, if you scan the QR code on the screen right now, you can watch an extended version of Ed's report. I'm delighted to say Ed's going to be joining us as well later in the programme a couple of times to talk about it in more detail. And I'm fascinated on his take, Sophie, as to whether we felt the full brunt economically. I mean, that is fantastic, sort of tangible example of what's happening. I think everyone, all the kind of classic economists said when the trade war started back in April, oh, it's going to cause terrible inflation. That inflation hasn't really arrived yet, but we are suddenly getting people wondering again, it was delayed as opposed to a false prediction from the experts. And I think that's kind of one of the key questions as to whether this policy from Donald Trump, which certainly hasn't derailed the US economy thus far, will hurt the economy at some point or not.
It's quite an important correction, actually, because we're very, like you say, the inflationary impact, as you're saying, that hasn't necessarily been felt. Really interesting.
Ed will be joining us later.
Now, this year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate Marina Corina Machado hasn't been seen in public since January, but she is expected to make a rare appearance in Oslo to receive her award in person.
The 58-year-old, who was awarded the prize for her struggle to achieve a peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy in Venezuela, has been in hiding over threats to her life.
So she's going to turn up in Norway, and that appearance is going to mark a real moment because it comes as the US continues to build pressure on President Nicolas Maduro. Let's just take a look at how we got to this point.
Well, Maria Corina Machado has been a key figure in Venezuela's opposition for over a decade. She served in the National Assembly and organised demonstrations against Nicolas Maduro's government back in 2014.
In 2023, she won the opposition primary to run in the 2024 presidential election, but she was barred by the government from being a candidate, which would be, of course, a very controversial election win for Maduro.
Shortly after the election, she announced she'd gone into hiding over fears for her life under the Maduro administration, which has now been in power since 2013.
And then earlier this year, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in promoting democratic rights in Venezuela.
Joining us now to discuss her legacy is Dr. Christopher Sabatini, who is a fellow at Chatham House, specifically for Latin America. Thanks so much for joining us. I guess the first question is, how significant is it if she really does go and appear in person to collect this very important award?
It's a powerful symbol. This woman has been an activist, as you mentioned, a politician. In 2023, she overwhelmingly won a primary in Venezuela by the opposition, a nationwide primary. And then she and her team, during the elections where she had thrown her support behind a stand-in candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, they collected data, the receipts and also the tabulations across the country and demonstrated that they had won 67% of the vote against Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was 30% or so, and basically demonstrated they had legitimately won the election, although Maduro claimed he had won it and never showed any proof. Now that she's outside Venezuela, this demonstrates both to her supporters inside the country, her dedication to her people, her representation of Venezuela, but also to the 8 million or so Venezuelans that have fled during the reign of first Hugo Chavez and then later his protege, Nicolas Maduro, that she's representing them too in the diaspora. So it's a very powerful moment. And for Venezuelans too, for a long time, this dictatorship, and it is a dictatorship, has been accumulating power, and most people really have not paid attention. This demonstrates that finally there is a recognition not just of the very excellent work she's done and the popular approval she's achieved, but also the suffering of Venezuelans for the last 2 decades.
I'm interested in your take as to how much that is needed, and dare I even say it, whether, I mean, this is a really widely respected award, but whether a big international award further boosts her case and her cause. How will it be framed domestically? Does it cut through?
It does cut through. Again, she was an inspiration to many people. While she was campaigning for Edmundo Gonzalez, she went to every town and city in Venezuela. She couldn't fly there. She had to take a car. And this demonstrates that there is still hope. Again, Venezuelans have endured 20 plus years of dictatorship and economic collapse where 3/4 of the economy has shrunk, has disappeared. This gives them a sense of hope, a sense of recognition, and it also gives her a sense of protection. Nicolas Maduro has said that he will not let her back into the country. We'll see. She managed to get out of the country. But this does demonstrate that her courage, but it also demonstrates that Venezuelans are still standing up to Nicolas Maduro. And despite the fact that the election was stolen from them, despite the fact that more than 2,000 people were arrested and put in jail for demonstrating over the election theft, that she's still out there representing her people, both in the country and in the diaspora.
Clearly, President Trump is trying to put a lot of pressure on Maduro to stand down and using some, I guess, quite widely questioned tactics to do so. What's your take on that? Should the intent, even the tactics, be celebrated or not?
No, they shouldn't be celebrated. The truth is that Donald Trump has, first of all, tried to couch this as a war on narco-terrorism, defending the lives of American citizens from cocaine. Only about 5 to 8% of the cocaine that reaches the U.S. shores comes from Venezuela. Fentanyl is not produced in Venezuela. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of drug users in the United States. But now he's beginning to show his hand a little more and is saying that this is about removing Nicolas Maduro, who doesn't seem to want to budge. It's been now about 5 months since this buildup has started off the coast of Venezuela. There's the largest U.S. aircraft carrier, more than 10 boats, destroyers, and amphibious land vessels, landing vessels off the coast. There are more than 10 F-35s in Puerto Rico. This hasn't rattled Nicolas Maduro or his inner circle and provoked sort of his exile or his removal by those around him, as Trump had hoped. Now we're coming to a point where will he launch land attacks? More than 80 people have been killed without alleged drug traffickers, without any evidence that they were in fact drug traffickers or were carrying drugs. This happened through missiles and drones that exploded their boats off the coast of Venezuela. And unfortunately, Maria Corina Machado has not questioned these tactics. These are really in violations of the laws of war, violations, quite frankly, of U.S. laws for engagement and the War Powers Act by the U.S. Congress. And she, I think in a desperation move, has not shown any light between herself and Donald Trump's policies. In fact, when she won the award, she dedicated it to Donald Trump. And this could be a problem, especially if this invasion, if there's invasion or some sort of military strikes, becomes difficult, messy. I think it could tarnish her image, not just in Venezuela, but internationally.
Really interesting. Great to get your take. Dr. Sabatini, thanks for joining us.
Now, imagine leaving the care system, wanting your personal records, your own records, and then waiting for 16 years to receive them. I mean, it sounds hard to believe, but the Information Commissioner is saying that that is happening as people try and piece together information about their lives so far.
We focus a lot on the experience of people in care on this programme, so we wanted to tell you about this new campaign being launched today. Delighted to say we're joined by the Information Commissioner, John Edwards, and a care leaver, John George Nicholson. Thank you both so much for joining us. I guess to kick things off, if you could just frame for us the scale of this problem that, as Sophie sort of said, does seem quite hard to believe on the surface of it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the right to access your record is fundamental. And what local authorities need to understand is that they are the custodian of the biography of some of the most vulnerable people in the community. So when someone exercises their right that they have under law to access that, it takes an enormous amount of effort, and they owe them a duty to deal with that with diligence and compassion and empathy, and we're seeing that there is a lot of room to improve there.
John George, you were in care yourself. We'd really appreciate it if you told us a bit about your own sort of story, because I know that you've had a battle, haven't you, to access your own personal records. So just how did that start for you?
It was funny because I didn't even know the records existed. After university, I went to work for a bank, and during some of the training, I saw something around the Data Protection Act, and I thought, oh, I grew up in the care system. Yeah. You've got the right to records. There must be some records about me. So I got my records twice. About 25 years ago, I applied for them, and I forgot when I applied for them, and they came a few months later with no warning, and they just arrived in a red folder, and I just put the package in my bag, went to work and opened them on the top deck of a bus, and that was the first time I saw those files.
Can you just explain what kind of thing is in your personal records, and why is it so important? I imagine particularly if you're trying to piece together your own life, right?
So the first set of records was 126 pages, and they're foster carers reports, they're social worker reports, psychologist reports. So lots of different reports about things that have happened to you, the things that you've gone through in your life, why you're in the care system. But the second time I applied for them, and the only reason I applied for them the second time was because I met someone in recent years that said you get different files. So the next time I got them, I got over 800 pages.
Wow. Wow.
And as you can imagine, it's quite an experience to get something like that.
John, the law says that these, I guess, both the data in the first place has to be accumulated and then shared at what point? As soon as...
That's right. People have a right to request their data, and when they express that right, the organisation has to give it to them within 30 days and give them a decision. We're seeing considerable delays. Sophie mentioned 16 years. That's extreme. But we've had to issue enforcement notices, for example, to Bristol City Council for consistently failing to meet the time limits. And we're also seeing cases of a lack of compassion or just basic humanity in the way in which access is given. John George gave an example there of just posting something out to him. we saw an example of a social worker turning up at the door with a beaten-up old archive box with some scrappy redacted files in it. And these experiences can re-traumatise people who are really trying to understand some of the things that have influenced the course of their lives.
Yeah, you mentioned there about it being quite an experience to open the second set of files. And obviously, whatever you're comfortable in sharing, but can you just talk us through a little bit about why that was?
I think it was probably more traumatising the first time because there's a lot of memories that you've buried that you've remembered to forget. And I was really ashamed of my care experience when I was young, so I kind of put it to the back of my mind. And then suddenly you're faced with this folder and all these reports that are reminding you of some of these most difficult times. And the issue with the file, it's often very negative. So it doesn't capture the nuance of your childhood, some of those good experiences you've had. It's very procedural, very bureaucratic. But the file's changed over the years because I've changed. And when I first looked at it, I was quite young, and now I'm 48. And I look at the file now as a parent, so I see the file through the eyes of my parents and things like that. And
you see, this is it, because I think that kind of gets the nub of the whole issue with the care system, because it's, you know, we're asking the state to be the parent. And if you look at a child through your parents' eyes, you are so forgiving, right? Yeah. Every parent thinks their child is amazing, even if they're not acting in that way, right? But if you're in the care system, like you say, if it's written through a negative slant on a child, I just think it's very telling, to be honest.
Can I ask, John George, if you're still pleased you got the reports and got all... I mean, as you said, some of it's written in a very kind of procedural way or even negative way. But the fact that it's been written, you presumably still want to get it at some point? Or is there even guidance as to how these things should be written in the first place that people could take away and feedback?
Well, first of all, I'm so pleased I've got it. It is such a unique document. I mean, not many people are ever going to have the opportunity to have something documented for so many years and in such detail. And even though there are some things missing, it does give me a gateway through memory to some of those better times. I think to those people that are creating files, most importantly, they need to co-create them with the person that they're writing the file with, that they should have their voice in there. One of the tragedies is my voice is hardly in there. So I think for those people, it's to put that person at the centre and to have that more nuance in there. So it's all the different things that are captured in someone's life. It's a shame that it's very, like I say, bureaucratic and procedural.
It's been so interesting to talk to both of you. It really has. Thank you for coming on the programme and for raising the issue. And I think some of the points that you raise are best practice going forward are super important as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
After the break, we're going to talk about how best to spot fake toys. We've got some examples coming up as well and some experts on the topic ahead of Christmas.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there.
What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Now, we're being warned to check exactly what we're ordering online this Christmas amid a surge of the sale of fake toys and electricals.
Now, buying fake toys might seem harmless and actually, like, value for money, right, cheaper, but it has been revealed that counterfeit gifts can also be quite dangerous to some children. Dodgy labelling, poor quality materials, sometimes choking hazards, and then some items could even contain banned toxic chemicals. Well, Adrian Simpson from the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents is here to tell us what we should look out for.
Well, good morning. Thanks for hanging us on. And I've got with me today some toys you really do not want to wake up to on Christmas morning. The first one I'm going to show you is this one here. This is a very popular item at the moment, but as you can see on the camera, these can pull apart very, very, very easily. There's no labelling on this. You simply do not know what it is made from. You do not know who has sold it to you, and it could really cause some harm if a child gets it and pulls it apart.
I'm just going to come in because I know exactly what that is. That is a Labubu.
I've just
Do you know about Labubus?
No, but I can tell it's a fake one.
That is a fake one. But the real ones are unbelievably expensive and difficult to come by. And yet, I mean, this is probably why all these children are obsessed with them.
I'm going to say the fake one doesn't look that appealing.
No, they're kind of this kind of weird, creepy face.
Yeah.
No, the real one's gone. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. I feel quite strongly about the Labubu thing. But it's dangerous, right? Because it's a choking hazard. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yes. So these can be pulled apart very, very easily. We do not know exactly what this is made from. If a child swallows it, they could be swallowing, quite frankly, anything. The real toys that you buy from legitimate retailers would have been tested. They will be made so that they're not a choking hazard to children, that they're made from material that is non-toxic, that won't cause any problems. So it's really important that you buy from legitimate retailers.
And what else have we got here then? Is that Pikachu?
That's I'm not exactly sure which one this is, but yes, this is another very popular item this year. So again, very similar. You can pull it apart quite easily. It's made of very, very cheap material that you do not know what it's made from. There's no labelling on it, so we do not know if it's been properly being tested. These are so popular at the moment, and they are absolutely everywhere. So really urging parents and caregivers to really think about these products and just realise that you shouldn't prioritise savings over safety. Just buy from legitimate.
Well, I was going to say, what's the key tip here? I mean, it sounds like it's going to retailers you know and trust, who presumably then the responsibility is on them, and they'd be punished for selling fake items.
Absolutely, yeah. The best way you can avoid buying a fake or counterfeit item is buy from a retailer you know of. Check what the reviews say online before you buy it. Because also think about if you have a problem with it, if it falls apart or you want to get your money back later, can you actually contact them? Well, they're actually going to give you your money back.
Can I ask, because, look, obviously in an ideal world, all parents would be buying from legitimate retailers, blah, 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 but money is a big thing, cost is a big thing, and, you can see the price pressures that parents are under at Christmas when they want to give their kids what they want. What's your take on charity shops? Because is that a way that you can get cheaper toys, more affordable toys, but if it's got a proper label on, then maybe that is a better way of doing it?
Yeah, we find that charity shops are a great place to get second-hand goods because, as we know, we're trying to all save a bit of money at the moment as well. And charity shops themselves obviously have a reputation to maintain, so they don't want to sell you things that are going to cause you injury as well. So that is a good place to find goods as well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I always sort of think about at this time of the year. It's a good tip for all of us. If you're having a clear out, do it before Christmas. Take it to the charity shop before Christmas, so that then you actually might be able to, pass on some of these nice toys for kids who really need it. Really good to have you on. Thank you so much.
Adrian, thanks very much. Now, as we start to wrap up the hour, the Mo Salah saga continues. In fact, it gets more and more heated. This is Liverpool's and Egypt's star player, and he started to have a fallout late last week after Liverpool dropped points in a crucial game. He'd been benched for 3 games in a row. And Sophie, he rarely gives post-match interviews. He did on this occasion and said he felt the club, because he'd been benched, were throwing him under a bus. Yeah, so Arne Slot, the manager, came back saying he's got no clue if Salah's played his last game for Liverpool. I mean, it's all kicking off. I just have to say, though, I agree with a guy called Martin Cave who's messaged me on X this morning. He's come up with a solution, actually, I'm pleased to say. So Martin's solution, which is great, and I think that Liverpool should take this, he said that they should loan out Mo Salah to the end of the season. Sheffield Wednesday would be a good option. Great idea. Great idea. As a Wednesday fan. By the way, if he did that next, I think anyone that is questioning his commitment to football would suddenly be massively on his side. Yeah. No Saudi, come to Wednesday, Mo. Yeah. We'll have you, don't worry. It's no problem at all. I actually love that. Let's start that. Martin, great idea. Campaign starts here. They're in need. I mean, the only problem is, I think you've got some financial troubles there, so I'm not sure you could afford his wages. Well, yeah. I mean, there are a few. I can see a few obstacles in the way. I'm not going to lie. Sell some shirts. Yeah, exactly. You never know. You never know. But I like that suggestion a lot. We will discuss this and very much more throughout the rest of the show. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Here on Mornings. Love it. I love that. It's so good. Yeah, so good. Love it.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf. Good morning from me as well. Lots to talk about today, including maternity care.
Well, the chair of a review into maternity services says the scale of unacceptable care of women and babies is much worse than expected. But victims worry the report lacks enough bite to create real change.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again.
Ukraine prepares to share a revised peace proposal with the US after European leaders gather in solidarity at Downing Street.
Government unveils the branding for Great British Railways as the Commons prepares to debate renationalising all of Britain's rail network.
Also coming up, calls for an identity reset as a survey reveals a crisis of masculinity in the UK. We're going to be talking to the supermodel, Gandy, about it.
And the car parts that ping back and forth over the US-Canada border will tell you why these tiny components reveal the true story behind Donald Trump's trade war. A very good morning to you. Well, the chair of the National Maternity and Neonatal Investigation says that nothing prepared her for the scale of unacceptable care women have received and the tragic consequences for their babies. Baroness Amos has published her initial reflections following meetings with families and 7 of the 12 NHS trusts being reviewed.
Honestly, none of this is a surprise. We've had multiple reports telling us how bad things are, women being ignored, babies dying when they shouldn't be, and we're going to get a set of national recommendations next year. But just to put that in context, we've already had 750 recommendations to reform maternity care in the last decade, and that's something Baroness Amos herself describes as staggering.
Well, here are some of the headlines of what Baroness Amos had to say. What I've found so far has been much worse than I anticipated, and the scale of unacceptable care experienced by women and families across the country is extremely concerning.
So she goes on to say the challenges that staff are facing as they deliver maternity and neonatal services to women and families also concern me.
Well, one of the NHS trusts under investigation, Oxford University Hospitals, found Rebecca Matthews, a mother, forming a campaign after her own traumatic birth. She says the investigation's initial reflections are troubling.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again in independent reviews before.
Well, this week here on Sky News, we've been delving into the crisis more broadly, and it's been laid bare once again by this report today.
And look, the thing about this story is that so many women will have their own story, and if you're listening to this, you might have something that happened to you or know of something that happened to someone you love. If you do and you want to share it, we want to hear it. We want to amplify what you've got to say. So let us know, mornings@sky.uk. And here are some of the stories that you've already sent in, voiced by our producers.
I was administered an epidural which was done incorrectly. It only numbed one side of my body by an anaesthetist who had already worked a 14-hour shift. When they called the anaesthetist back, they were informed that he had gone to do another surgery and I had to wait another few hours before he could administer the epidural again. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression very soon after that. It affected the way that I bonded with my first son and took 4 years for me to try for another child.
I had pains. I told them I felt like I was peeing myself. They checked my blood pressure, listened to the heartbeat and sent me home. By Sunday, my pains were worse, but the weeing had stopped. We went back to the hospital where they checked my blood pressure, listened to the heart, and then belittled me by saying, "Darling, it's called labour for a reason. Go home and have a bath."
I have a history of trauma as a minor, and as a result, PTSD. My birth preferences document included crucial information on my sensory and emotional needs going into labour, and the reasonable adjustments I'd need to be most comfortable and to avoid unnecessary distress if I was in a lot of pain. The triage nurse did not pass along my birth preferences document to the midwives, nor was this verbally communicated. While pushing, I was in a lot of pain, and as a result, I was being quite loud in my discomfort. The obstetric doctor sharply told me to push again, but without the screaming this time, which I found triggering and upsetting.
Well, we can talk now to our health correspondent, Laura Bundock, who is here for us. I think the thing about this is that it comes as absolutely zero surprise to anybody who's had any contact with maternity care in the UK.
Yeah, I think, you know, every single one of those stories speak to anyone who's given birth. And all these stories, I think, hold a mirror up to this widespread problem where Streeting's described it as a systemic failing up and down the country. You know, we've had all these investigations. We've had reviews, a parliamentary inquiry last year, 748 recommendations made, assurances given every time that lessons will be learnt, things will change, except they're not. And this is the huge task now facing Baroness Amos to sort it out. And I think the very fact that this investigation of hers has already had to be extended, won't be out till the spring, just gives you an idea of the scale of the issue. I think looking at her initial reflections, we have heard all these things before. Women feel like they haven't been listened to, that they've been disregarded when they say something's not quite right, that basic care is sometimes lacking, they're not being taken to the loo or given a meal, and these huge discriminations when it comes to poorer women from ethnic backgrounds. And I think even the staff themselves are sort of highlighting issues when they're working in these challenging units, that they get death threats, they have rotten fruit thrown at them. So we've got the investigation going on. It is in the very early stages, but I think already there is a fair amount of scepticism as to whether or not this one will make any difference, because we've had so many before. And I think certainly those connected to those 12 trusts that are being reviewed feel, well, there's not going to be any accountability. There's no formal assessment. So what will change?
So can you just remind us who commissioned this and why has it been delayed, and what is the final remit of it? If you know what I mean.
It was Wes Streeting back in June, I think, following that series of scandals, which was resulting in so many different inquiries. It was decided that we need a sort of a bigger piece of work here. There was a lot of call for it to be a statutory inquiry, but I think the feeling was it would just simply take too long. You're looking at years rather than months. So it was decided a rapid review would be the best way of doing it. Having said that, it is still a rapid investigation, but taking longer than they thought. And I think it's just trying to make sure that everyone's voices feel heard and that change actually happens. But that's tricky. That is tricky.
I mean, you talked there about all of the people coming forward and the stories holding up a mirror. And I have to say, we've had so many stories coming in, which, I'll be honest, doesn't really surprise me. I mean, just looking at a few of them, Louise talking about feeling ignored by people, which is, again, something that comes up again and again, people just not being listened to. For example, we've also had something come in from Paula, who said that she had such a bad experience with her second son. My sons mean the world to me, but that's saying if I had my second son first, I would never have had another. I didn't. That's my story. And it just comes through to what people are saying. Julie has also emailed in to say, although 30 years ago she still lives with the scars from an epidural, and then it became evident that her son's cord was around his neck, so she then was given a forceps delivery. I mean, these stories, just a snapshot of what we're getting through from viewers, I think are just reflected in so many women's experiences. And the thing that gets me is, how can you have confidence that something is going to change? 750 recommendations to the NHS in the last decade on maternity care, and we're still in this situation.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to pose some more of these questions about what will change or not coming up, because Baroness Amos will be joining the programme a little bit later in the morning, so stay tuned for that. And for now, Laura, great stuff. Thanks so much. Ukraine is expected to share its revised peace plan with the US today after coming under pressure from the White House to quickly agree to a settlement. The initial US-backed agreement was widely seen as favourable to Russia.
So yesterday, President Zelensky met with Keir Starmer and other European leaders at Downing Street, where the Prime Minister says the European allies agreed to ramp up support for Ukraine. Here's our international correspondent John Sparks, a warning his report does contain flash photography.
The festive trimmings were relegated to the sidelines as Europe's senior leadership team made their way to Downing Street. There was only one thing on the agenda here, and that's Ukraine.
Can this peace plan work, Chancellor?
The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, was first to arrive, his demeanour confident enough as Donald Trump tries to impose a peace deal on Ukraine. President Macron came next, mindful that the Americans are running out of patience. These men have been here before, but the pressure on Ukraine is growing. President Zelensky then followed, a man in an increasingly difficult position. He needs all the friends he can get.
There's a hug for President Zelensky from the British Prime Minister. You know, I think this is mainly presentational. It is a big show of public support for the Ukrainian leader. The Ukrainians are getting battered at the front, and the Americans won't pick up arms for them. So what will the Europeans do? Can they keep Ukraine in the fight?
The display of solidarity came with pre-prepared statements. The British Prime Minister pledging unconditional support.
We stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire.
Yet it's not clear what that means in practice. In a telling moment, President Zelensky then acknowledged his country's vulnerabilities.
We can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
The fear that Donald Trump could walk away. But the alternative is also troubling. New US peace proposals may be difficult to stomach.
I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from the US side, but we have to talk about that.
The American leader may not be across the detail, but he knows how to apply pressure. And we saw him do it after his envoys met the Ukrainians for 3 days of talks.
Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it.
Yet these men must grapple with the details of those talks. Does the Donbass go to the Russians? Will Ukraine get a guarantee of future security? For the time being, we got this.
President Zelensky, have you made progress today?
A wry smile and an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the perilous position he's in. John Sparks, Sky News in Westminster.
And now, next this morning, our trains are getting a rebrand. So the all-new Great British Railways is being unveiled. It's part of the government's effort to try and bring train operators back into public ownership.
Well, today, the landmark Railways Bill will be debated in the Commons. It follows the government's decision to freeze rail fares for the first time, for the first time in 30 years. Rob is here to break this all down for us. There's a lot of detail and change in the policy, and there's some kind of branding and painting on top.
Yeah, the announcement today is all about what the trains will basically look like when they're nationalised. So we'll get this red, white and blue livery, I think is the technical term. And the stations will also have, a lot of stations will have this rebrand as well. The actual logo is a bit of a sort of throwback to the days of British Rail, really. It's that sort of double arrow logo that you have on there. And the government's been pretty clear to point out that they haven't used some sort of fancy external agency to design this. They've done it in-house, trying to keep costs low. I think they've gone for something that's relatively simple, I guess. There's always a risk when you're trying to rebrand something that you just sort of overthink it a bit and it ends up being not very good. It will start to come in from spring. Not all of the rail companies have been brought back into public ownership yet. And it will take 10 years to repaint the thousands of trains on the network. It costs between 200 and 300 million pounds. As well, there'll be a new app where you can book without a booking fee as well. And so, look, yeah, it's a sort of surface level thing, but I think this is a massive change on the railways, and it's something that I guess just reinforces for voters, for passengers, that actually this has changed, something has changed.
I was asking you last hour, got a little bit of grief for my odd comment, that the yellow nose looked a bit weird for something that's being rebranded, but there is actually a reason for it.
Yeah, I diligently went away and found the answer for you, Wolf. Train noses are painted yellow primarily for safety, to make quieter diesel and electric trains highly visible to trackside workers. But apparently it's less necessary now because of bright headlights.
There we go. Well, anyway, I think, do you know what, actually, it points out that my question was, from a purely uneducated safety perspective, was legitimate, because it does look a bit weird.
Do you know what the other question is that I thought, which I've gone away and found the answer to as well, is will Wi-Fi be better on nationalised trains?
And will it?
So I'm told by someone in government that yes, it will. They're rolling out this infrastructure around the country to try and cover sort of black spots that you have on the train network. But in all seriousness, this will start to take effect 27, 28. You've probably got an election in 29. it seems like a sort of low-level, simple thing, but I think if someone could get on a train that has turned up on time, log on to the Wi-Fi that is working, and go to a hospital appointment, say that is actually been kept to time as well, it might be enough to make them think about not voting for the other guy and maybe vote for Labour.
Rob, really interesting. Thanks very much.
We spoke to Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, about trains. I also asked her about something that I think is perhaps one of the most controversial subjects in British transport today.
My view, if we can get more people cycling, that's a good thing, because I actually think some people have described it as a bit of a miracle pill in terms of public health, because actually, it means that you're doing a little bit of exercise. And I do think in some cities, some of these new e-bikes, which can be hired, have attracted a new group of people to using them, which I think is good.
But I thought you were going to frame that as one of the most controversial debates between the two of us. Also true. Sophie's a big user of Lime bikes. I find them rather annoying because they're always just blocking the pavement. But to be honest, if we play the full clip, I completely agree with where Heidi Alexander was going there, which is, I hadn't realised before today, it's up to individual councils exactly what their rules are. And she was articulating that it'd be more sensible to have set places where they can be parked. Then I'm a fully signed up badge-wearing member.
There you go.
Even if I don't use them that much.
You need to try and get them on a Lime bike next.
But it is annoying when you're kind of trying to navigate the pavement and they just sort of... They're quite heavy to move.
They are heavy, but they feel great when you're on them, I have to say.
Because of the battery power.
Anyway, so there are calls for an identity reset after a report revealed what it's termed as a crisis of masculinity in the UK.
According to a public survey, film and TV imagery carry a large portion of the blame here, with belief that men are portrayed in popular culture as one of two extremes, either pathetic or frightening. And we're joined now by the supermodel David Gandy to talk about this and other things. A very good morning to you, David. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on the programme, and we've got lots we want to get to.
Yeah.
Masculinity is a big part of it, your own career. We actually were talking earlier and wanted to start on AI, because I've seen you've made some comments about this. And just last week, our colleague Yalda Hakim saw a major deepfake of one of her interviews. And that obviously takes quite a lot of technology to interpret an interview happening with a politician in the back and forth. I guess if it's stills for photographs is your main trade, it's even easier for AI to be a problem. Is it something that you're very worried about?
I'm worried for the younger generation and coming into the modelling industry and maybe the movie industry. And not just the young models, it's the total crews that go along to having done the teams that are put together to create what we are looking at. They are pretty much made redundant by one person. You have a team of 20 to 25 people. I've just been on the shoot myself, from hairstylists to makeup to creative directors, and the use of AI is making every one of them redundant. So yes, it could be a massive problem. I have my image trademarked and everything else, so it's not even going to impact me as much. But brands will also take advantage of that, of younger models and their imagery and buying it, and also scraping other people's imagery. That's more the point what I'm kind of... I've been talking about, that the AI can sort of scrape parts of your image so you can look like that image, and there's no regulation about it. So a bit like in the movie industry with the script writers and the behind-the-scenes guys in America, they striked until there were some regulations put in, and but here it seems to be a bit of a free-for-all, to be honest.
It's interesting to talk about scraping images, because I mean I've seen my own image being used in kind of random AI on social media or whatever. I mean this must happen to you as well, even if you have the trademark.
It does, but we can't keep an eye on it. That's the problems, and that's sort of social media for you. And the problem is at the moment, I like you, I'm looking at stuff and I'm not sure if it is AI or if it's real. So people are commenting about things. I said, oh, have a look at this. And I said, I can kind of tell, but I said, you realise that's AI, but they don't. Mm-hmm. So quickly that is spread and shared, and it's, there's a lot of engagement before you can even stop it.
Obviously, that's the sort of latest tech threat to everyone. I guess the other threat of the last decade has been the extent to which some people's platforms and the messages they deliver across it have been promoted too much, or an extent to which you'd be worried about. And that is something that concerns you as it relates to the broader image of masculinity that's out there?
I think again, the use of social media has become sort of so prominent, where it's the point of everyone's source is social media. Again, it's unregulated, and it's certainly one of the things we talked about with sort of masculinity and the wrong people who are shouting about or talking about in a very, shall we say, disruptive and immature way about what masculinity should be and how young men should act in many ways, and people are following. And you usually find sometimes the people with the biggest voices are not the people that should be listened to. So yes, it's but it's the young people that are following on social media, and again it's unregulated, and you usually find people like Andrew Tate and are kind of working on the vulnerable more than anyone else, and the people that can be quite impressionable as well. So yes, I mean, if I've just seen what Australia have done, banning social media until you're 16. I mean, if it was up to me, I would probably go a bit further and ban it until I was 18. Not I was 18, I was 18 a long time ago. But yeah, until people are sort of adults and 18 and understand the dangers of it.
I'm really interested in what you've had to say on masculinity, because I feel that this is a conversation that we as women have been having for quite a long time about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be female, kind of not being pigeonholed on that.
Yeah.
And I just think actually perhaps the debate on masculinity needs to catch up a bit. And you've spoken about positive role models. I loved how you said that Peppa Pig is promoting a bad narrative about dads. When you said that, I wanted to kind of punch the air, because I kind of think it's slightly offensive to all those dads who change nappies, who turn up on the school run, who do their bit as well. I just wondered if you wanted to talk a bit more about, how important those role models are.
Well, role models are important. The CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, have come out with this. They've done a report called The Lost Boys, and there's a crisis between 16 and 25-year-olds because they're not quite sure what masculinity means anymore or what it's defined as. And I'm not sure if we have to define it. I'm asked a lot to define masculinity, which seems quite strange to me. But there is certainly a point where young men are feeling demonised. And sort of stereotyped into kind of being a problem. And if you sort of look at the stats of the report, 40% of sixth form students are being told that young men are a problem. And then because of that, and because this narrative of this toxic masculinity that's spread around social media, which isn't a word I didn't even hear for many years until social media was around, that's being sort of spread around, and then that sort of algorithm is spreading to young women, and 60% of young women are saying they're afraid of young men. So there's a massive problem here, but that's, vice versa. But the Peppa Pig was an example, to be honest, and there's sort of been mixed reviews where some of the sort of journalists and media have just taken that point about Peppa Pig.
Are you more on Team Bluey's dad?
Team Bluey's dad's very cool. I mean, I have two young daughters, so I could go on, I could reel out all the children's programmes that I have to watch.
It's a serious point, though, because actually, genuinely, he's very hands-on with the kids, and it feels like quite refreshing to see that kind of...
Well, it is. I just think we're also in a different era where maybe men and masculinity has been defined as something slightly more... Probably like my father's day. My father went to work. He, as I said, sort of joke, my father could burn a salad. It was the roles where they worked. My mum and dad both worked, but there were defined roles. And fathers, for the first time, I think our generation was that first generation to change nappies and do the cooking, help around the house. And we also have to, we are going to work. And those roles, of course, are changing, but they're... It's nothing. I'm not making anything here about this or them or women or guys. It's just I think we are now, for the first time, women and men are a partnership and have to be more than ever.
Can I ask a little bit more broadly, David, about your incredibly successful career? And in particular, I've seen you speak about the importance of British brands in the past. We had the budget last week, or 2 weeks ago now. I keep forgetting exactly when it was. It seems like yesterday. And one line that we haven't talked about that much in it was the fact that the government did increase allowances for the enterprise investment scheme. This is something to try and encourage people to invest in domestic businesses. How important is that? And do you feel we're at one of the most challenging points in your long career in trying to back British brands, or is there help and success for them? What sort of stage are we at?
I've invested in quite a few brands myself, either through EIS funds or directly through EIS or SEIS. It's a huge incentive to do so. My brand, my Wellwear, has sort of, that's how it got investment. But I have to say, over the last couple of years, to get investment for brands or startups has been virtually impossible. It has been really, really difficult. And I've known so many brands that haven't been able to get to that next level from lack of investment from individuals or personal equity just not wanting to invest in Britain or London for many reasons. But yes, we're seeing it. It's difficult for young startups or brands or older brands as well, mature brands, but really because of the cost of employing people and the extra cost of employing people have gone up, and that's what they're seeing. And yeah, we're kind of weathering the storm a little bit, but there's still no incentive to invest in many brands at the moment because of difficult times.
We're sadly out of time, David. We could talk for ages about your amazing career, and we'd love to have you back. But there's one final question that I wanted to ask, which is how often do you crack and have a massively indulgent, bingy burgers, fries, whatever your guilty pleasure is, or are you just very militant to not do that?
Oh, I think people get the misconception that I don't eat anything being a model. I'm also a sort of 14-stone guy. I need to bring my calories in, so I think I surprise people when they say what I do eat, to be honest. But everything in moderation, I always say. So that's about it.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure catching up with you today. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
David Gandy joining us there. Now, Paramount has launched a hostile bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery as it seeks to trump a rival plan from Netflix to buy that company.
Warner Bros. Discovery is the Hollywood giant. It's behind Harry Potter. It's behind HBO Max, so it couldn't get bigger than this. Wilf, talk to us about this. So, just unpick this for us. What's going on?
So, there's basically 4 historical big American movie studios. Universal's a sister company of Sky's, Disney, Warner Brothers, and I'm forgetting one of them, Paramount.
That's it, got it.
And then Netflix, obviously, is the big pretender of the last decade. And what's really crazy about this story is that as of Friday, Netflix, the pretender that's become the giant, was going to buy one of the old studios in Warner Brothers, which 10, 20, 30 years ago, you just have said is impossible. But the latest development, which was yesterday, is that Paramount, another one of these studios, said, hold on, we want in on this, and is coming over the top to try and have a bid. I think the interesting detail on this is then the politics of it all, because these have to get regulatory approval. And yesterday, Donald Trump said, I'm not so sure about this Netflix purchase, and he's very good friends with the family behind the Paramount purchase. So you're starting to see politics inject itself again in this particular deal. And either way, in the short term, what we've got is a sort of Succession-style boardroom drama playing out in some of the most, storied companies in the world in America.
I'm so interested in the whole kind of young pretender thing of Netflix and how everyone is kind of reacting to that. Coming up, we're going to be talking more on trade after the break. Our very own Ed Conway has been looking at the real impact of the Trump trade wars. What impact are they having, if any?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Donald Trump said his return to the White House heralded a new golden age of America, but a global trade war sparked by his controversial tariffs have created a rather messier reality.
Well, our economics and data editor Ed Conway spent time on the front line of Trump's trade war, looking into the impact of this economic experiment. Let's have a look at what he found.
Over the past year, I have been travelling the world in search of an answer. How on earth do you tell and do justice to a story like the trade war that we're going through right now, the potential breakup of globalisation? This is the border between Canada and America. And while there's a river running between them, you couldn't really get a better example of two completely intertwined economies. Parts for motor cars going across on the bridge behind me from Canada to America and back again, potentially picking up tariffs on the way.
Modern passenger vehicles are assembled from thousands of tiny components. Here at Lanex, they make steel parts you'd only ever see if you look beneath the body of a car, as well as these strikers that secure the vehicle doors when you close them. Making door strikers is not a sexy business. You need to bend and extrude thick steel rods and press steel coil into just the right shape before welding it all together. But, and this is the key part, each of these little components is made not just in Canada, but also in America.
I mean, everything is intertwined. We don't just have Canadian suppliers on one program right start to finish. So you would buy your material from the US side. You would process it on the Canadian side.
Consider the journey one of these striker plates takes in its production. The steel comes from Wixon, just northwest of Detroit. It crosses the border to the Lanex plant in Canada. Then it's sent to Brampton, Ontario for heat treating before travelling back across the border to Warren in the suburbs of Detroit for plating. Then the part goes back over the border to Canada again, where it's packaged and sent to Lanex's customer, who then sends it back over the border to assembly plants on the US side. This little component has crossed the border 4 times, but it's one tiny example of how much trade is embedded in the goods we use.
Well, Ed, I'm delighted to say, joins us now so we can discuss some of his findings in a little more detail. Ed, I mean, it's amazing to see that how many times those little parts go back and forward and thus sort of how crazy the idea of tariffs on your new neighbours are. I guess there's been some exemptions. My biggest question on this is, are all of the tariffs now fully felt in the economy? Because I guess, to be fair, in the short term, it hasn't derailed the US economy. It hasn't caused massive inflation so far.
No, and that, for us that was part of the point of this, was to say, there's a lot that we've heard about the trade war from politicians, from economists. What does it feel like when you're actually kind of down there in the front line? And in particular, what lessons can you learn from it? And one of the striking things so far is, a lot of economists thought that this was going to be massively inflationary because you're putting this extra kind of price on goods going across the border, particularly stuff going in. So like you say, that component I showed you a moment ago, that's not covered by the tariffs. However, if you're, the maker of those kind of components buying in machinery, and a lot of that machinery comes from outside the US, then you are having to pay tariffs on that. For us, I think the question was, why hasn't that shown up in inflation yet in the US, which it hasn't so far. And the striking thing is when you're kind of down there at the kind of ground level, what you encounter is that a lot of these people, and we talk to people who are in the kind of tier 1, 2, 3, so basically people who are supplying to the big car manufacturers and other producers as well, they're still trying to work it out. They're still trying to work out how much they're actually supposed to be paying in tariffs. And even now, we're kind of months on from the imposition of tariffs, but no one is quite sure in some cases what the actual tariff is supposed to be on something. So, we were talking to one manufacturer, they needed to get a big part for one of their machines. They had one supplier in Canada, another supplier in Canada. One of them said, look, listen, there's going to be a 25% tariff on this. The other said, listen, I don't think there's any tariff on there. Same part. Wow. From the same country. And they don't know until basically they send it across the border and see what happens. And so you don't really kind of get this detail until you kind of go out and actually talk to people. And what that detail perhaps tells you is this stuff is taking longer to feed through. And part of the, implication of tariffs isn't just about costs, but it's about complexity. And it's about friction that's not visible in kind of economic spreadsheets. And everyone is trying to deal with that at the moment. But part of the reason that we wanted to kind of cover this is that we might be moving into this other age at the moment. It wasn't just Donald Trump imposing tariffs on, cars coming into the US, it was Joe Biden as well. So if we're in this new age where you're seeing greater barriers on trade, not just in the US, but elsewhere around the world, what does that feel like on the ground? And we're not used to that. We've spent years kind of being quite complacent about the ease of just getting stuff. Order something, it turns up. Often you don't have to pay anything on it. Now we're just in this other world, and we're only now beginning to fathom what it actually means in practice. So it's a kind of more complex. I mean, the whole film, it's available online, and then we're showing it on Sky kind of later on this week. But it is a more nuanced piece than usual, because this isn't just a black and white story. This is about complexity, and that's perhaps part of the reason why it's taking longer to feed through to things like inflation than economists had expected.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. We're going to talk more about it next hour with Ed. And a reminder, as he said, his full film, QR code still on the screen there for you right now, is available on the Sky News website.
Now, Nordhoff and Robbins, which is the UK's largest music therapy charity, is going to welcome artists like Matt Goss, like Rick Astley, to headline their London Carol service later on today.
The charity supported almost 17,000 people through more than 50,000 music therapy sessions in 2024. And aims to use the power of music to break through barriers caused by life-limiting illness, disability and social isolation. I'm delighted to say that Matt Goss joins us now ahead of the Carol concert. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Guys.
So what is music therapy?
I mean, it's not an exact science, but I think music is transformative. Nordhoff and Robbins is leading the way in that, and I think that it's a custom fit. That's the beautiful thing about music. It permeates into certain places that are so deep, and it creates light where there's darkness. And I think, that's what I'm really privileged to be part of this tonight.
And Nordhoff Robbins is the sort of lead charity in this space.
Exactly. I mean, I think, without question, the leading charity. And it's not just children, it's people with learning difficulties, Alzheimer's. You can get somebody that has a deep illness and suddenly all of their motor skills and hand-eye coordination comes back because of music. It's a powerful, powerful tool. I mean, even as a musician myself, I've been through very dark times, and music is just lifts you out. Think about our whole life. It's the tapestry of life. Any movie, any meal we have, without music, it's quite a sad place.
And this is specifically aimed at helping people embrace music themselves to learn music?
It's music therapy. Again, it really isn't an exact one size fits all. It's actually specific, and that's what Nordhoff Robbins really knows best. They know how to, individualize the treatment. So, but music, as you know, when I write a song, for example, it can be interpreted 100 different ways, and sometimes I've been more inspired by someone's interpretation of something that I've written, and that's the same with what music can do. It can just permeate in different places. It just creates light where there's darkness. I mean, really.
You were speaking there about music in your own life and those dark periods of your own life when music has, as you say, kind of lifted out of the darkness. I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about that. Is there like a particular song or a particular memory that you have of that?
Yeah, when I lost my mother, I had my show at Caesar's Palace, and I was back on stage within 1 week. because the only thing that really could lift me into a place of wanting to be around and get through my grief was music, and that connection of what music can do with an audience, and just, you know, you don't have to be, you know, have to have a learning difficulty to understand the power of what music can do for you, you know.
Is there a particular track or a particular song? I mean, I'm sure your own stuff, but if you want to pick out someone else's that speaks to you.
Pretty much all of Stevie Wonder's catalogue or Elton John's catalogue, you know, Donny Hathaway, I think there was a voice that completely transforms any room.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Just.
And tonight is the Carol concert. Are you performing?
Yeah, myself, Rick Astley, Katie Melua, we're all going to, you know, put our best foot forward and just sing our hearts out, and just going to be really beautiful. It's a really nice time of year to be a singer, because you can just turn up to some of these special events.
Yeah, we talked about carols a bit, haven't we?
Love a good Christmas carol.
Wilf, and actually me as well, kind of love that kind of traditional kind of Christmas carol as well. There's something
Favourite
about
bit is
it.
the big crescendo at the end,
Yeah.
when you've got a nice descant. And by the way, I'm only a listener to these things.
I bet you really can hold a tune in the shower.
Yeah, in the shower, exactly. Drowned out by the noise of the water.
Yeah. Or even, which is quite bad, when I'm exercising and you're really into the song, and you suddenly realise you've blurted it out.
Have you done that?
Oh,
that's so good.
I sometimes listen to a hymn whilst working out. It can be, again, when you get to the crescendo, it's quite like uplifting, even if it's sort of slow.
Now I'm thinking about doing a crescendo.
Organ.
You need one. If you've ever been in the gym with Wilf and he's suddenly started singing, then please let us know, because I would love to hear what that sounds like.
I mean, you wouldn't really love to hear about it, but, you know, you certainly wouldn't love to hear it. So let's put it that way.
Amazing.
Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with the concert tonight.
Thank you so much. On the programme today, we've been talking an awful lot about maternity care, about the failings in the system for women, for babies, for families. And we're going to be talking to the woman who authored that report up next, Baroness Amos. She says that she was shocked by what she found.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Now we've had a new report out into maternity and neonatal care, and honestly, there's not a single surprise in it. It is still, and I don't use these words lightly, a total disgrace. We've had multiple reports telling us this, and yet the same problems keep happening. Women not being listened to, mums and babies being harmed or even dying when they shouldn't. So many people have their own stories, and I'm sure like, if you're listening to this right now, you might have your own story or you might know somebody who does. But there is one thing that I wanted to pick out from the report by Baroness Amos. The investigation heard cases of women who had lost babies being placed on wards with newborns. Now, this might seem like a little thing, but can you imagine losing a baby? The worst moment of your entire life. All those hopes and dreams for your child's future. You know, carrying the baby inside you, feeling it grow, and then the blood, the desperation that maybe it's going to be okay, surely it has got to be okay. And then the reality that you've lost your child. And then what happens? You're put on a ward full of other mothers, just like you, but these mums have their little babies in their arms. Now, that is not just negligent, it's cruel. And it also happens systematically throughout the NHS. Having a miscarriage, go to the maternity unit. Just had a scan where you hope to see your baby kicking, but you actually find out it doesn't have a heartbeat. Go and sit down with all the happily pregnant mums. You know, this is symptomatic of a system where women are treated like vessels, not like people who should be heard and listened to. Because bringing life into the world can be the happiest time of your life, but it can also be the worst time of your life. Either way, it is the most important moment, and that is why we've got to get this right. So with that in mind, I'm very pleased to say that the chair of the review, Baroness Amos, joins us now on this programme. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for your detailed and honest report into the reality of maternity and neonatal services in the UK. What have you found?
Well, Sophie, thank you. And can I start by saying, you know, my condolences to all of those women and families who have been harmed, who have also lost their babies. Their babies have died. And I have heard so many experiences since I started this investigation. And one of the things that I want to say back to those women and families is that I know it is not easy to do, that they are talking about these experiences time and time again because they want things to be different. Mm-hmm. What I have published today is really reflecting back what I've heard from my engagement with those families, because I have not yet concluded the site visits to the 12 NHS trusts that I will be visiting. We had to reschedule because of the resident doctors' strike. So I am not publishing findings or recommendations. It is too soon to do that. But I did not want a long gap. I wanted the engagement with families, with the trusts that I've had so far. I wanted to put it out there, what I have heard. And I have been shocked. I've been shocked because there have been so many reviews before. Over 748 recommendations have been made previously. Yes, some have been implemented, but some have not. We don't know what the impact of those have been, so we're doing a separate piece of work to understand that. But what I have been asked to do is to come up with some clear national recommendations that will stop this and will make a difference. It just cannot continue. There is too much harm, too much distress, too much trauma, and the long-term consequences for families, for communities, and for all of us as a wide team are almost unbearable.
Unbearable is a word. It really is. You say there, you make the very valid point that there's been 748 recommendations over the last decade. And look, you know, none of this is a surprise. This is the kind of awful thing of it. You know, we've heard the Ockender review. We've spoken to our friends, our family members, our loved ones. We know what's going on. You know, the cynic in me is like, nothing's going to change. What are you going to do to, you know, make something change?
Well, I very much hope there'll be change. And the reason I say that is because I was commissioned to do this. It's an independent review, but I was commissioned by the Secretary of State to come up with some systemic recommendations that would make a difference in the short to medium term. And what he has committed to is a task force with experts on it, with a families first principle, to turn those recommendations into an implementation plan so that things do change.
Now, are you going to hold his feet to the fire on that? Are you going to personally make sure that the Health Secretary does deliver on it?
Well, it's the Health Secretary, and I have spoken to him on more than one occasion. He has said that he is absolutely committed to this. He has heard from families. He's shocked by what he has heard. And yes, of course, part of my responsibility once I've delivered my report will be to argue very strongly for implementation of those recommendations. I mean, ultimately, it is for the Secretary of State, but he is setting up the task force as we speak, and he has given his personal commitment to this.
The statistics on women who aren't white are really shocking. And I should say, by the way, you know, the system's pretty bad for everyone, including white women, including middle-class women, across the board. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that if you are a black woman giving birth in hospital, you are more at risk. I just wonder if you want to talk a bit about that. You know, do you think there is unconscious bias? Do you think there's even systematic racism in the NHS? What's going on?
There is clearly discrimination. Listening to what black women have told us, listening to what Asian women have told us, many of the things that they talk about are across the piece, you know, not being listened to, the kind of lack of basic care. I mean, all of these things are the same. But when a woman tells you that she is making choices that she knows may be detrimental to her because of her previous experience of healthcare, because of the racism that she has experienced, there's something additive here in terms of race. And inequalities is a key strand of the work that we're doing, looking at issues around race, but also mental health and neurodiversity as well.
Just finally, one thing that really stood out to me, and I mentioned this in the introduction, is women who lost babies being placed on wards with newborns. And I just feel that this is kind of the kind of basic humanity point that we're lacking in our maternity care and our care for women who are pregnant, who might be struggling desperately to have a baby, who might be on the brink of losing a baby, like the worst moment of your life. And what I would describe as the kind of casual cruelty with which we deal with them.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, it is a good thing to do that would make a difference. Or women who are they've lost their child, and then yes, they are put into maybe a separate room and so on. But then when they leave hospital, they have to walk out through antenatal care. They have to walk out, through wards where women have had children. This is so basic and fundamental. We must be able to make a change to that, surely. As you say, it's a cruel, cruel thing to do.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And I would just like to say good luck in your battle to try and make some change and to try and get some changes. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our women and families deserve this change, and I'm going to work hard to make it happen.
Thank you.
What stood out for you?
Oh, there's so much. I think the fact that she acknowledges that this is not a new thing, that there's been 748 recommendations before, she's going to do her bit to try and push it forward. But also that some of the stuff, like what she said at the end about women who've lost children, this is quite basic. Mm-hmm. Surely this kind of stuff doesn't need loads of money to sort. It just needs, I guess, just putting women and babies at the heart of what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. More on that story to come throughout the programme, as has been the case over the last couple of days, actually. More later on that. As we wrap up the app, we're going to touch on a story that's really caught a lot of attention over the last couple of days relating to Mo Salah. This is, of course, the Liverpool legend, one of the best players in the world. He's been an unbelievable servant to the club, and he's electrified the Premier League, but hasn't been on the best form of late, got benched for 3 games in a row, and then what was quite rare for him, he gave a post-match conference last week, a post-match interview, which he doesn't usually do, and he said he felt that the club were throwing him under the bus, and it's led to this big debate as to whether he's being petulant or not, and whether he's a team player or not.
Well, he's at war with this man at Onslaught. Let's have a listen. I think we can say he has no clue about whether or not Mo Salah's going to play another game for the club.
He was very respectful to my staff members, to his teammates, and he trained really hard. So to an extent, it was a surprise for me that when I heard after the game that he gave the comments he gave. I think my reaction to that is also clear, and that's that he's not here with us tonight.
I don't know, at the moment it feels like he's unlikely to play again. It's all got very heated, but can't you just apologise and draw a line under it?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's gone too far. I think it's gone too far.
He only gave 1 interview.
Sure. The main problem is, though, if he scores a few goals, I'm sure then he'll be back in, right? It's all about the form. Great to have you with us this hour. We'll see you just in a few moments more on those maternity failings coming up.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello, good morning. It is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
chair of a review into maternity services says the scale of unacceptable care of women and babies is worse than expected, but victims worry the report lacks enough bite to create real change.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again.
Ukraine prepares to share a revised peace proposal with the US after European leaders gather in solidarity in Downing Street.
The government unveils the branding for Great British Railways as the Commons prepares to debate renationalising all of Britain's rail network.
Also today, we'll be joined by the former Scotland rugby legend Kenny Logan as he joins calls for more men to get tested for prostate cancer.
And we're also going to hear, I'm excited for this one, from one critic fanatic, a British teenager heading to Australia without getting on a single plane or to watch the Ashes. Not sure if she should bother with England's performance.
Get over there, hurry up, before we've lost. A very good morning to you and welcome to the programme. Well, the chair of the National Maternity and Neonatal Investigation says that nothing prepared her for the scale of unacceptable care women have received and the tragic consequences for their babies. Baroness Amos has published her initial reflections following meetings with families and 7 of the 12 NHS trusts that are being reviewed.
But the truth is, the worst bit of it in some ways, is that none of this is a surprise. You know, we've had multiple reports telling us how bad things are, women not being listened to, babies dying when they shouldn't have died. And we're going to get a set of national recommendations next year. But to put it in context, we've already had 750 recommendations to reform maternity care in the last decade. Baroness Amos herself says that is a staggering number.
I have been shocked. I've been shocked because there have been so many reviews before. Over 748 recommendations have been made previously. Yes, some have been implemented, but some have not. We don't know what the impact of those have been, so we're doing a separate piece of work to understand that. But what I have been asked to do is to come up with some clear national recommendations that will stop this and will make a difference. It just cannot continue. There is too much harm, too much distress, too much trauma, and the long-term consequences for families, for communities, and for all of us. There is clearly discrimination, listening to what Black women have told us, listening to what Asian women have told us. Many of the things that they talk about are across the piece, you know, not being listened to, the kind of lack of basic care. I mean, all of these things are the same. But when a woman tells you that she is making choices that she knows may be detrimental to her because of her previous experience of healthcare, because of the racism that she has experienced, there's something additive here in terms of race. And inequalities is a key strand of the work that we're doing.
So a big part of this, obviously, is the fact that multiple reports have happened before. It's something that Baroness Amos talks about herself. And I just wanted to bring you, because I've just had a message from a woman called Donna Ockenden, who, of course, is, if you're interested in maternity care, you will know this woman's name. She's been kind of pioneering in some of those investigations into failing maternity trusts. She says, absolutely no surprises in today's report. I wish there was new news, so to speak, but there isn't. All of the Ockenden review actions were endorsed by the government and opposition parties in March 2022. Nowhere near enough has been done. Action is needed now. And I think this, again, just backs up this sense that you're having all of these people who are looking into the failings of maternity and saying, what is going on? Why are we not moving more quickly on this?
Is there a sort of party political aspect to this? I mean,
I think it goes beyond that, I'll be honest. I don't get the sense there is, and it's mainly because people like Donna Ockenden, people like Baroness Amos, I think they just don't want to get involved in it in that way. They just want to find something.
I guess my point is the very fact that we're having another review and it's like commissioned by the new government, and you do wonder why. You know, there's other issues where this comes across where there is clear party unity in wanting to solve the issue, but it's almost as if needs to commission a new report themselves and maybe buy some time themselves to try and deliver the changes.
Yeah, well, one of the NHS trusts under investigation is Oxford University Hospitals, where Rebecca Matthews formed a campaign after going through an awful birth herself.
I was quite disappointed by the fact that it just seemed to be a bullet point list of failings that actually we've seen time and time again in independent reviews before.
Now to our health correspondent, Laura Bundock. Laura, what are your reflections on this?
I mean, I think, like we've been saying, every time we hear these stories, really harrowing stories, you know, ranging from the death of a baby, the death of a mother, to things that, you know, seem to happen too often, parents just not feeling like they've been listened to. So this lack of basic care. I think these stories are holding up a very depressing mirror to this systemic failing that's going on at the moment. And I think the real challenge is, you know, we've had report after report. It's interesting talking about whether or not this is a party political issue. We had an all-party group set up who did the huge inquiry about it last year that got published. They made 12 recommendations. We've had enough recommendations. We know what's going wrong. When you look at the initial sort of reflections and impressions of Baroness Amos, she's talking about the same things, women being disregarded, you know, that there's huge discrimination when it comes to age, when it comes to your background, the staff being badly, feeling that they're being badly treated as well. We know what the situation is. This is what we've been hearing all along. It's what happens. And I think a lot of people are worried that although the review is underway and Baroness Amos is speaking to families, she's speaking to hospitals, she's carrying out visits in person, if those 12 trusts that are under review, so these trusts that have got problems and have had problems, why is there not going to be any accountability relating to these trusts? And if there isn't going to be accountability there, so they're not going to formally assess what's gone wrong and who might be behind that with individuals as well, how do you make the change that is so badly needed?
I just want to reflect for a moment, if I can, on some of the emails we've been getting in today. Because honestly, reading these, I found like a really emotional experience, and it's just worth just reading the words of some of the women who've written in. Sadhana, I don't want to have another baby in this country because I don't trust the maternity services and new baby care in a developed country like the United Kingdom. It's sad to see. Ash says, when it comes to my daughter, the system has never shown us care, ever. I'm speaking out because I need people to understand trauma doesn't end when the baby's born. For some of us, it becomes a lifelong battle, and I'm still in this fight. This is Marie, and Marie says, I honestly don't think a single day goes by without me in some way thinking about my daughter's birth and all that it has brought with us. There's anonymous people as well talking about being left in delivery rooms with students, faulty heart monitors, 8 minutes to deliver the baby, or they'd have suffered oxygen deprivation. I want to bring you this one from Carl, who says that he couldn't tell you the name of our midwife or wouldn't recognise her in the street. And they had to have an emergency C-section after being left in the ward. He then goes on to say, our daughter had raised CRP levels in her blood. 3 to 4 months down the line, she started seizures, which now at the 12 years of age, she still had multiple episodes of daily, and he suspects that is down to the care at the birth, that he's a full-time carer for his daughter. I mean, these are heart-wrenching stories about the lifelong impact this kind of thing has.
I don't think we've ever had a story over the last 2 days of so many people getting in touch with such, as you've used the phrase before, shocking but not that surprising stories, given all of these reviews that we've had. And again, it comes back to the point, Laura, about where are we in this process? And why is it taking so long?
Well, we're at the start of this process. This is meant to be a rapid investigation. It's already lasting longer than it was supposed to. And it won't publish until the spring. But I think if there's already scepticism as to what it's going to actually achieve, if it's going to make the meaningful changes to maternity, then people are worried it could end up being a whitewash. We've heard it all before. And I think it's what strikes me always with this story is that we're told having a baby is the most joyful, beautiful experience that anyone can go through. And the reality is the absolute opposite, I think, for so many people. And I think you get caught up in the new baby being a presence that you sort of almost put the birth to one side, and yet we know it continues to haunt people.
And also, I just want to speak up again for people who've lost babies or who've had miscarriages or who've battled to have a baby, and the I would describe it as cruel care that they've experienced. If you are one of the people who's emailed in with some of these stories, me and Wilf just want to say thank you for sharing your story, and we're listening.
Indeed, great thanks, and to Laura as well for that report. Now, Ukraine is expected to share its revised peace plan with the US today after coming under pressure from the White House to quickly agree to a settlement. The initial US-backed agreement was widely seen as favourable to Russia.
Well, yesterday, President Zelensky met with Keir Starmer and other European leaders at Downing Street, where the Prime Minister says European allies agreed to ramp up support for Ukraine. This is our international correspondent, John Sparks, a warning his report contains flash photography.
The festive trimmings were relegated to the sidelines as Europe's senior leadership team made their way to Downing Street. There was only one thing on the agenda here, and that's Ukraine.
Can this peace plan work, Chancellor?
The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, was first to arrive, his demeanour confident enough as Donald Trump tries to impose a peace deal on Ukraine. President Macron came next, mindful that the Americans are running out of patience. These men have been here before, but the pressure on Ukraine is growing. President Zelensky then followed, a man in an increasingly difficult position. He needs all the friends he can get.
There's a hug for President Zelensky from the British Prime Minister. You know, I think this is mainly presentational. It is a big show of public support for the Ukrainian leader. The Ukrainians are getting battered at the front, and the Americans won't pick up arms for them. So what will the Europeans do? Can they keep Ukraine in the fight?
The display of solidarity came with pre-prepared statements. The British Prime Minister pledging unconditional support.
We stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire.
Yet it's not clear what that means in practice. In a telling moment, President Zelensky then acknowledged his country's vulnerabilities.
We can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
The fear that Donald Trump could walk away. But the alternative is also troubling. New US peace proposals may be difficult to stomach.
I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from the US side, but we have to talk about that.
The American leader may not be across the detail, but he knows how to apply pressure. And we saw him do it after his envoys met the Ukrainians for 3 days of talks.
Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it.
Yet these men must grapple with the details of those talks. Does the Donbass go to the Russians? Will Ukraine get a guarantee of future security? For the time being, we got this.
President Zelensky, have you made progress today?
A wry smile and an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the perilous position he's in. John Sparks, Sky News in Westminster.
Well, next this morning, our trains are getting a little rebrand. Today, the all-new Great British Railways is being unveiled, so it's all part of the government's efforts to try and bring train operators back into public ownership.
And today, the landmark Railways Bill will be debated in the Commons. It follows the government's decision to freeze rail fares for the first time in 30 years. Rob is here to discuss all of this, and of course the debate about the legislation is perhaps the most important part, but the new paints on the trains is perhaps the better part to look at.
Yeah, a red, white and blue makeover with a logo that kind of harks back to the days of British Rail. It's the sort of double arrow thing that we're quite used to already when you're trying desperately to find where the train station is in London or elsewhere. They'll start to be repainted from spring next year. It'll take 10 years to do them all, but the government says that's on purpose because it costs about 20 grand to go to repaint a train. And so they don't want to spend the 200, 300 million pounds all at once. And they also say, well, some of the trains are new already. They've only just bought them, so they're in pretty good nick. So I think they want to wait for them to get a bit banged up before they go repainting them again. of course, it's meant as a sort of very visual representation of the absolute massive overhaul that's going on, I guess, mainly sort of behind the scenes in the rail network in terms of the nationalisation programme, rather than lots of different operators, all brought under one umbrella of Great British Railways, where you can book it with an app that's being created, book it with no booking fees, and it's to try and avoid this sort of mishmash of different operators where, you know, your train gets cancelled on one line, but you can't use another line because it's being run by a different company. And I guess where the sort of the paint job is important is it shows people what's happening, right? Like you can make these big reorganisations, but it sometimes doesn't land with the public. I guess part of this is about a visual representation of showing people, look, this is what it's going to look like. You can see the difference. Of course, what it looks like is only part of the story. It's also about whether the things actually turn up on time and how much they cost.
Yeah, exactly. I want you to stay here, Rob, because I want to try and elbow you into another little discussion we've been having on breakfast.
Basically, you're recruiting someone that has your view, so I now lose 2-1.
I actually don't.
Oh, is this the line bike battle? Right.
So we asked Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, about this morning. And actually, it was quite interesting because she said that there needs to be more strict measures on where you can park e-bikes, as in only on parking spaces.
My view, if we can get more people cycling, that's a good thing, because I actually think some people have described it as a bit of a miracle pill in terms of public health, because actually, you know, it means that you're doing a little bit of exercise. And I do think in some cities, some of these new e-bikes which can be hired have attracted a new group of people to using them, which I think is good.
That part, in fact, what she goes on to say, I agree with as well.
Yeah, go on, explain what she says.
Yeah, because she goes on to say that the problem with them is perhaps how freely they can just be dumped in various locations and get in the way of pedestrians on the pavement or even drivers on the roads. And I actually didn't realise this until earlier today. It's specific to different councils what the rules are, and some are somewhat of a free-for-all. We're so pro-bikes that you can leave them anywhere, even if it's at the cost of pedestrians and drivers. And she was saying actually that they should kind of have a more universal set of rules on that front, which I fully agree with.
What, you're an e-bike user, aren't you?
Yeah, I think they're super useful. In my bit of South London, though, you don't have to necessarily park them in set spots. Yeah. And what some sneaky people have been doing on the roads around where I live is sticking them in their back garden.
No.
So riding them from the train station to the back to their house, putting it in the back garden, and then in the morning waking up, booking it, taking it out and riding it back.
That's outrageous.
So the problem is I sit there going, right, I'm going to the gym or whatever, this will be easy, there's one round the corner.
And you can't get to it.
I'm walking up and down the road going, where
is
on earth is this bike?
I've had that happen to me before because I use these things, but now that makes complete sense. Someone's got them in the shed.
Yeah.
Well, that problem will be solved again if you have to park them in set areas.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. Maybe you're right. Yeah.
Solves all of these problems.
I'm going to try and get Wilfred an e-bike. That's my new target.
I love cycling. I just I find it annoying the way they can block the pavement. I mean, they're heavy to move.
They are.
They're surprisingly heavy. You kind of expect them to be a light tricycle to lift up like my son. You sort of break your back trying to move them. And if you don't have a subscription, you can't wheel them. Anyway, we could talk about this for too long. We already have. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Trump's trade war. Ed Conway is back to break down all of the short and long-term implications.
I bet he likes an e-bike. Ed Conway.
As well.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Before we get to the story, we've continued throughout the break. Ed is pro-cycling, pro-line bikes, but owns his own bike.
I ride my own bike.
Yeah.
But I think e-bikes are amazing. They are amazing. I mean, like if you've never had a go, have a go.
They are really good.
I mean, I take it that I know you're not a fan of the littering of pavement with e-bikes, and I agree.
Set places to park, yeah.
But it's a game changer. It's a game changer. It's a wonderful feeling to waft around on an e-bike. And
yeah, that's true. You do waft. It's true.
Waft.
It is true.
Have you not wafted?
I have.
Sorry, this is a whole other conversation.
Do you know what I used to waft occasionally on when I lived in New York is the scooters, which you're a fan of.
I like the scooter. Okay, yeah. This is the segue
this is a seamless
to my
transition.
trade piece. So, as everyone will see in a moment,
in Antwerp, no less.
I did go on an e-scooter in my pursuit over the last kind of actually pretty much most of this year. We've been gathering gradually little bits and pieces of material on what's going on with this trade war, because it's quite a hard story to cover. You know, it's quite abstract, and so we wanted to try and tell the story of what was going on the ground. And so to do that, we focused particularly, on lots of different bits and pieces, including going to Antwerp and riding on a Lime scooter. But we also wanted to kind of drill down on a sector that is supposed to benefit the most from these tariffs, or supposed to be one of the big beneficiaries, and that is the motor industry. So we have been making this film. Here's a little preview of it to have a look at. Over the past year, I have been travelling the world in search of an answer. How on earth do you tell and do justice to a story like the trade war that we're going through right now, the potential breakup of globalization? This is the border between Canada and America. And while there's a river running between them, you couldn't really get a better example of two completely intertwined economies. Parts for motor cars going across on the bridge behind me from Canada to America and back again, potentially picking up tariffs on the way. Modern passenger vehicles are assembled from thousands of tiny components. Here at Lanex, they make steel parts you'd only ever see if you look beneath the body of a car, as well as these strikers that secure the vehicle doors when you close them. Making door strikers is not a sexy business. You need to bend and extrude thick steel rods and press steel coil into just the right shape before welding it all together. But, and this is the key part, each of these little components is made not just in Canada, but also in America.
I mean, everything is intertwined. We don't just have Canadian suppliers on one program from start to finish. So you would buy your material from the US side. You would process it on the Canadian side.
Consider the journey one of these striker plates takes in its production. The steel comes from Wixon, just northwest of Detroit. It crosses the border to the Lanex plant in Canada. Then it's sent to Brampton, Ontario for heat treating before travelling back across the border to Warren in the suburbs of Detroit for plating. Then the part goes back over the border to Canada again, where it's packaged and sent to Lanex's customer, who then sends it back over the border to assembly plants on the US side. This little component has crossed the border 4 times, but it's one tiny example of how much trade is embedded in the goods we use.
So we want to remind you again, the full report is available online, well worth watching. And Ed, I wanted to pick up on a topic that we started to touch on a little bit last hour, but I think it could impact everyone's, cost of living going forward, mortgages going forward. But there was a take when tariffs came in that it would cause a sudden and pronounced spike in inflation. That didn't come, but people are now, again, raising the question whether it was just delayed, and rather than the sudden spike, we're going to see a sort of the rest of this decade with inflation a bit higher than people would have previously thought, which maybe that is what we're seeing.
That's what I would think. And I think, it's very hard to model this stuff. And partly that's because, we're in quite unknown territory. We are... Donald Trump has raised tariffs to the highest, which is obviously this tax that you pay when you're kind of importing something from various countries. He raised it at the highest level since the 1930s. It's a very different world now than it was in the 1930s. When you think about how a car is made, that's one of the things we're showing in this film. You were involving so many different companies, getting so many different components from around the world. And when you're trying to kind of, tear that apart or indeed just impose little costs along the way, then that's very hard to model. And I think that's the difficulty here is economists said, yeah, this should raise inflation and everyone's going to have to pay more. But working out precisely how that happens is difficult. And let me give you an example. So one of these companies, they make plastic parts that go into cars, just little plastic parts, including, when you press the button on your dashboard, that's probably them, or the light beneath it, that's them. They need these big machines in order to melt the plastic and to mould it into shape. For those machines, you need what are known as dies. Basically, it's the moulds that go inside them. They can only get them right now from Canada, India, Japan, a few other places. That involves tariffs, OK? But they were trying to buy a set of them from Canada. One producer said, listen, there's going to be 25% tariff on this. Another producer said, I don't think there's a tariff on this at all. They didn't know what the tariff was going to be, and they've only just received it quite recently. Since we were filming, they've only just received it, and it turns out it didn't have a tariff. So imagine that happening kind of across the US and across the world with people just not sure what the actual tariff is. And then you kind of get a sense of, OK, this stuff may have been announced months and months ago. It may have come into force months ago. But the reason why we're not yet seeing the impact of it is because it's complex and it's only gradually dawning on people what the actual costs are. And so that's kind of interesting to me. And that's what we have to reckon with now, because we're in this different world. And it's not just Donald Trump, it was Joe Biden. We're in a world of greater protectionism. And in a world of greater protectionism, this kind of fiddly stuff suddenly becomes all important. And it builds up to higher prices for the rest of us in due course.
Ed, great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
Coming up, we are going to be talking about prostate cancer. A lot of row over whether or not people should be automatically screened for prostate cancer. Well, someone who has a view on this is the former Scotland rugby player Kenny Logan.
Former Scotland rugby legend Kenny Logan has joined calls for more men to get tested for prostate cancer.
So he was treated for the condition himself, and he's now launching a campaign called Don't Wing It. Great advice, I have to say, for all healthcare things, but prostate cancer in particular. Kenny joins us now. So talk to us about the campaign.
So, yeah, I'm very lucky that Johnson & Johnson are helping me back this campaign, Don't Wing It. So, yeah, I was very lucky that I caught my prostate very early on. I got a blood test that's... You get a PSA test, and that took me on the journey of then getting monitored. And then within 18 months, I'm sitting down with the specialist saying, now you've got cancer, you now need to get it out. So you don't want to hear the C word, but, you know, I think for me, I was lucky because I found it. I sort of went looking at pure accident because Gabby her podcast was about menopause, and I'd listened to her talking about Davina McCall, for example, her issues, and I was like, well, if that's what the women are going through, what are men going through? And I just went for a well-man test, and then suddenly it flags up my PSA's a little bit high, and I'm getting monitored. So that saved my life, really, because I hadn't really thought much about prostate.
So it wasn't like a symptom thing?
There's
it wasn't
no
like
symptoms.
you were saying, oh, no. I've got this. You literally just went for a overall check, and that's how it came
random.
up. Wow.
Totally random. So the thing about prostate, you've got to go looking for it. And that's why men have to go get tested. It's really important to go and get the bloods done. And also, the first thing to do is go into prostate cancer, go for the risk checker, and that can take you through that process, and then you can get yourself sorted, and you're already on the way. The key thing for men is just thinking, oh, it's not going to happen to me, oh, it's not going to happen to me. But, you know, 1 in 8 men, 1 in 4 for black men, so it's the biggest killer for men, 55,000. A year I will get prostate, and 12,000 will die with it. So it's a big concern.
A couple of weeks ago, there was a government review as to whether this would become, you know, a requirement for all men and to be screened. Obviously, they decided not to go with that in the short term. Is that one of the reasons you're timing this campaign now? Is it something you're disappointed to see?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, we are disappointed because you can be on every channel and tell men to go and do it, but they just don't do it. They just, I'll do it next week, and it just disappears. I think if you've got pushed by the government or by the doctors for a national screen, would be great. I know that Prostate Cancer UK are in talks to them about new methods of testing, how it can make it easier. So I think we've got to work with them, and hopefully we can, at some stage, be, you know, men at 50 years old get tested, or 45.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we talk about men in particular. And you were talking there about, you know, your wife's podcast, Gabby Logan's menopause podcast, the work of Davina. And I'll be honest, as a kind of, you know, woman in her 40s, I'm kind of benefiting from this as well, this more open conversation we're having. So I'm interested in the kind of difference between men and women. You're calling it Don't Wing It. Yeah. So is that because men just, you think, I guess, wing it a bit? I don't know what
we sort of just go at one hand. I think the one thing I learned about menopause, we go like this very slowly, where women just fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
Suddenly it just hits them. We take a long time to sort of, our hormones to drop. So we don't think it's going to happen to us. We think it's aging, we're getting a bit old, but we are changing, right? So and because of the technology nowadays, you can find out, well, this is not right. How can I get... There's so much out there information.
Yeah.
And I think from my point of view, looking at what happened for me was just the initial... I mean, I was saying the other day, if I didn't know about it, would I just have kept winging it and going along? Suddenly it hits me. I'm 55 years old. It's too late. You know, sadly, you know, Chris Hoy, who's very public about his prostate, you know, he's in different... His journey is different compared to mine.
I guess the other point is actually just knowledge of how serious this can be. Because as you said, there's no symptoms until suddenly that there are. But in one way, I'd say that it's encouraged. That has changed significantly in
we're
the
talking
last...
about it now.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, not everyone's watching.
Should be.
Yeah,
well,
come on. Everyone's watching, aren't they, Will?
Come on.
What else are we going to be doing on your morning?
They will be today because you've been kind enough to join us. They tuned out in our last chat about bikes, perhaps, a little bit. But I guess...
I found that really interesting.
Oh, did you actually?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's being sarcastic.
No. What's your view
you can't just leave them everywhere. You've got people...
Yeah, you see, good. That's
just leave them.
There we
it's
go.
disrespectful.
I agree.
Put your bike back.
Exactly.
Get checked. Come on.
Get checked, park your e-bike properly. I love it, this is great.
Nice place. Well, I guess the other thing I was going to come to in terms of you've gone through this process.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think this is the main hurdle for men or women for similar things to get checked, but it's probably still relevant. Was it a tough thing to go through? And I guess are some people nervous because they don't want the bad news? And there are bad examples.
Probably one of the things.
But I guess you're an example of why not. You don't have. It's not that you don't have to be nervous, but that if you catch it early, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, when I sat with my surgeon, he said if you go looking for this disease, for prostate cancer, you get checked well in advance. By the way, you got to get checked every year. It's not like you get checked once and you wait 10 years. You get checked every year. It's like an MOT. So you've got to think, I've got to go and get checked. And if you do catch it, your story is going to be pretty good, I think, because you're on that road. Where if you ignore it, it becomes a different conversation. So just go to Prostate UK and check the risk checker. Get yourself, just go and get tested. Simple.
Kenny, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Kenny coming on to talk about the campaign to get checked for prostate cancer.
Yeah, don't wing it. Great advice. A bit of breaking news to bring you from Greater Manchester Police, because we can tell you that a man's been charged with the rape of 2 teenage girls in Bolton over the weekend. So the name of the person who's been charged, Sultani Bakatash. He's an Afghan national. He's been charged with sexual offences against 2 14-year-old girls in Bolton and will appear in court this morning. He was arrested, I should say, in the early hours of Sunday. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it, but just to recap that breaking news coming in from Manchester today.
Now, there's been what could be an incredible breakthrough in the treatment of leukemia. People with previously untreatable blood cancer are now living disease-free thanks to a world-first gene therapy.
Yeah, this is actually honestly potentially quite exciting. So 16-year-old Alyssa Tapley, the first patient to have the experimental treatment after she was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of leukemia that wasn't responding to treatment. Well, it now is. She's since remained healthy. We can talk to Rachel to tell us a bit more. This is such a positive story. It's really lovely.
It is, isn't it? And I think it's potentially exciting because it's not just a breakthrough in this particular type of cancer, but this is a relatively new technology which could be used in a whole host of different ways that we, at this point, probably can't even imagine. But just to hone in on one person's story, I mean, little Alyssa, 16 years old now, she was 13 years old when she became the first person to receive this very experimental therapy. You can see her there with her family. I mean, look at those smiles. At 13 years old, as you said, her leukemia not responding to treatment, and she and her family were actually considering palliative care. That's how bad it was, this brutal, seemingly incurable cancer. But now she's healthy, she's planning her future, and it's thanks, it seems, to this potential treatment for a really aggressive form of leukemia. It's T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a rare form of blood cancer where the T-cells in the immune system basically grow out of control and they can take over the system and stop it from working. But she was the first of a very small number of trial participants who were able to receive this new treatment that was developed by scientists both at Great Ormond Street Hospital and the University College London. And basically scientists take the healthy immune systems from a donor, so from somebody separate to all of this, and they make 3 really tiny edits in the DNA, basically reprogramming those cells. They're then put into the patient, so someone like Alyssa, and basically these cells are told to go on and destroy all of the T cells in the body, so the healthy ones and the cancerous ones. They can then get transplants, and obviously we've seen with Alyssa, it seems to have worked. And actually the stats are pretty good, even though we're talking about a very small number of people. So 9 children, 2 adults with this cancer were treated as part of this first study. 82% of the patients said to be very deep in remission, 64% disease-free. And the side effects, researchers say, tolerable, just things like low blood count and rashes. So really promising. As we said, it's far too early, really, to see how this could work widespread. I mean, before anything like the NHS would have to consider it, there would be more trials, and we know that funding has been found for 10 new patients to be able to receive this treatment, but it could escalate, and as I said, who knows what this technology could go on to do in the future.
Which is what I was going to ask about. As you said, it's clearly early days even for this particular area of treatment, but gene therapy is an area that's getting a lot of funding and a lot of testing, and there's different types of diseases or illnesses that could be more suited to it. And I guess leukemia is one of them because of the way it spreads so quickly around all of the body. And you need this type of treatment that can go to all cells.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that has only recently been discovered. I mean, I think a similar type of technology won the Nobel Prize, I think, in 2020, just a few years ago. And since then, scientists have almost taken the idea behind this of editing the DNA. Just a few tiny changes can make this world of difference. And they're obviously running with it in all sorts of different directions. So obviously, too early to say, does this work long term? What are the implications? But obviously really promising from the start. Just for someone like Alyssa to have had 3 years, let alone to be looking forward to her future and considering a career now in cancer research is so exciting.
Those pictures of a family, it's
I
just
mean, they tell
amazing.
it all, don't they?
They do tell it all, they really do.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Great to have you on. Now, coming up, somebody right now is travelling to Australia to watch England in the Ashes without using a single plane. And I guess my question to our next guest is, looking at the scoreline, was it worth it?
Also, I'm going to have to check my geography. Isn't there quite a big stretch of water?
There's many questions. We've got a lot of questions for our next guest.
It's going to be a long boat ride, that last leg of it, isn't
Is he going to make it?
We're going to discuss.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On-Board Lounge. Fly better. Thank you.
Hello again. We're talking about maternity failings on the programme today after the report by Baroness Amos. And the thing that I've been trying to dwell on a little bit is the care of women who have lost a child and what they have to go through and what I would describe as the cruelty and the lack of compassion that they're found. There's been 2 emails in to us this morning that it is really worth reading in full because they're deeply moving and I think get to the heart of this problem. So the first is from a woman called Sina, who talks about her own birth and how traumatic that was. But then she also talks about having lost her baby and having a miscarriage. She talks about the trauma that she experienced from being congratulated by my midwife on my pregnancy while I was on the maternity ward in order to have this procedure, having lost her baby, to being forced to stay on the ward with newborns post-procedure, hiding my tears beneath my mask. It was during COVID. Not to mention the constant phone calls from midwives asking why I wasn't there for my scan appointment after I had already miscarried. I mean, these are the kind of things that happen all the time. There's another woman who's emailed in called Jeannie, who's talking about her mum, and she says that my mum never forgot what happened, and I think after me, you are the second person that knows this, but she would be so pleased if she were here that someone is addressing this problem, which is why I think it's very important for us to share and really try and amplify some of these voices. And she basically said that what happened, that her mum lost her baby. Her mum never heard her cry, but she then lost the baby. She was told that her baby had not made the required standard, never even saw her or held her. But again, my mum was put in a ward of mums and babies, and my mum never forgot it, being put on that ward with babies. And I think this just goes to the conversations we've been having, something quite simple about what happens after you lose a baby and the impact it can have on you afterwards. And
I think what is so crazy about all of this, and we could use the viewers' emails and posts as an example, but the many broader reviews as perhaps a wider example, is how many cases there are of it.
Yeah,
you know, it is. I have been shocked by that over the course of the last 2 days when we've covered this story. Quite how many people are speaking up in such a brave, but also these are private issues, and I think there are sadly so many examples. That's exactly it. It's like the deeply personal, private issue, but the importance of speaking out about it as well. We've heard from Donna Ockenden as well, who messaged us at the programme on X today. She, of course, ran the Ockenden review into maternity services at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital, and she said absolutely no surprises in today's report. I wish there was new news, so to speak, but there isn't. All of the Ockenden review, immediate and essential actions from Shrewsbury were endorsed by the government and the opposition parties in March 2022. Nowhere near enough has been done. Action is needed now. That I think is my point earlier, where I meant, obviously there's not party politics between whether things should be done or not on this, but there's when you do have party unity on a topic, and there's a few others that you could speak about as well, like grooming gangs, I think is another one, and yet a new government comes to power and they commission another review. Now look, it is a faster moving review than some can be, although it's been delayed, and as Laura Bundock was explaining, we're not going to get the full details of it until April or May. But there has been other reviews, and multiple parties, as Donna Ockenden said, endorsed the findings of it. So why are we still carrying out another review to find the same findings? Thanks for sharing your stories, genuinely. Thank you, they've been deeply moving, I have to say. On the programme as well, we've been talking to David Gandy. You probably know him as being possibly the most famous male supermodel in the world, I think that's fair to say. I think, for sure. And we've asked him about the use of AI in modelling.
I'm worried for the younger generation and coming into the modelling industry and maybe the movie industry. And not just the young models, it's the total crews that go along to having done the teams that are put together to create what we are looking at. They are pretty much made redundant by one person. You have a team of 20 to 25 people. I've just been on the shoot myself, from hairstylists to makeup to creative directors, and the use of AI is making every one of them redundant.
I thought that was really interesting because, we talk about AI, I mean, particularly after last week with Yalda, our colleague Yalda Hakim being deep-faked. And of course, for still photos, it's even more of a threat. And I thought what he had to say more broadly about whether there's enough laws in place to stop the AI models being trained in this area. We talk about it a bit. There was a bit of a backlash from the likes of Elton John and Paul McCartney in terms of whether they're getting trained on what clearly is copyrighted material when it comes to music or written stuff. But, just to create a sort of ideal image of someone to use as an AI model going forward, I'm sure has scraped all sorts of people's private information already, and there's never going to be really repercussions for that.
Just to finish the programme off as well, Paramount has launched a hostile bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. It seeks to trump a rival bid from Netflix to buy the company's studio and streaming networks.
Yeah, so the background of this, just for those that... have we got a clip of this?
Yeah,
we do have a clip of this. There we
yeah.
go. There we go. I didn't know that we did. Here we go. This was us chatting about that on Cheat Sheet earlier. Netflix had a deal agreed last week to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, is the name of the full company, as well as having the film studio Warner Brothers. They own HBO, for example, which has made shows like Succession and Game of Thrones. They also own TNT Sport here. Except yesterday, Paramount said, hold on a second, we're not done with bidding, and they've come over the top with another bid. So there's this sort of Succession-like boardroom battle now going on in the US for one of the most storied film studios, Warner Brothers, with other assets like HBO added. I think the added little drama in this, Sophie, is the politics. President Trump said yesterday he was worried about competition if Netflix was the buyer, and he is seen as very close to the family that controls Paramount.
I'm so fascinated by this. It's kind of like the old versus the kind of new pretender, but then also the politics of it as well. Really fascinating.
Yeah, so Donald Trump's good friend, Larry Ellison, who's top 4 richest people in the world, he's a good friend of Tony Blair's as well. He backs Tony Blair's institute. His family, his son, owns Paramount. And Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, is advising that bid. So, you know, in a world where being close to the king makes a difference, that bid is seen as more likely to succeed all of a sudden. Plus,
wonder why.
Wonder why. But the other nuance I'd just add to this, so the Netflix bid for Warner Brothers has also got criticism, not just on competition concerns, because it's sort of the biggest player buying another one, but from people in the industry. So despite whatever the sort of politicians' motivations on this, I do think you're seeing a lot of content creators not want to see one of the old film studios be owned by the big streaming service, particularly those people that really care passionately about theatrical releases, you know, releasing films in cinemas rather than straight to streaming services. There's a lot of little details on this, but again, politics is certainly a big part of it.
I should just say, if you're expecting to see Tommy Lamb, the England fan, trying to get to Australia for the Ashes, he's stuck, basically. He can't get up for us because I'd imagine he's got all sorts of connection problems on that journey.
But he should be making time to travel because he's got to get there whilst we haven't lost.
Yeah, TikTok might not be long.
Yeah.
Let's get over there, Tommy.
But we'll try and get him on because
we
do want to chat with him. It's not going to be today. And safe travels in the meantime if you're able to hear us. Probably can't hear us because we couldn't come today.
Yeah, exactly. We will try and get one again as well. Just to finish up, we are going to leave you with a drama at Anfield because star striker Mo Salah has been left out of the Liverpool squad, travelling to Inter Milan for tomorrow's Champions League tie. And that was after he's got into an almighty spat with his manager.
So the fact that he's not travelling to their next game means, at the very least, this is getting worse before it gets better. But I think the question now is, will it get better? And you know, this is unquestionably Liverpool's most important player of the last decade. Delivered them, you know, 2 Premier League titles, Champions League title, and they wouldn't have won those almost certainly without him. His tenure there might be over all of a sudden in rather a sour way. Yeah, he's been benched a couple of times. He's not been happy about it. He said that he's been thrown under the bus, and as a result, Slot, the manager, has come out and said that, he doesn't know if he's played his last game for Liverpool. It's quite sad, to be honest, because he's such a legend, and you want him to leave, if he does, on good terms. Yeah, we'll keep following that story and many more on Mornings in the days ahead. But up next is Gareth with Sky News Today. Thanks for watching.